County Board of Commissioner meetings for Wednesday, November 20th. It is 8 a.m. and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think I did that a little out of order. We usually start with the invocation. So, Commissioner Hundley.
Thanks. Just really short, I want to thank everybody who took the time to come here. I want to honor the people who really do the hard work, who work in the building and the other county buildings here, and look forward to working with you all today to do good for the county.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Wheelock. LaPointe.
Here.
Jewett.
Here.
Hundley.
Here.
Kofia. Klaus.
Here.
Henschel.
Here. All right, we have a quorum. Next, we have approval of the minutes for November 6, 2019 regular meeting, page 3 in the packet. Any corrections or a motion to approve?
Move to approve minutes. Support.
Moved by Klaus, supported by Jewett to approve the minutes as presented. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. First public comment, please read the rules.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, allow an additional opportunity or time to speak if determined germane and necessary to the discussion. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4, Order of Business. However, public comment may be received during the meeting when a specific agenda topic is scheduled for discussion by the board. Prior to the first public comment, the chairperson will indicate the topics on the agenda for which public comment will be accepted. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson. Please be respectful and refrain from personal or political attacks.
All right, would anyone like to address the board this morning? Please step right up to the podium and start with your name and where you're from.
Good morning, Commissioners. Whitney Wara. I'm 7195 Logan Lane, and here I'm a Vice Chair of Parks and Rec and appreciate the ability to serve in that capacity, and just wanted to make a quick comment on the appointments that you're working on today, and just send a little bit of love along to one of my fellow commissioners right now who is in an incumbent seat. Commissioner Kivel has been a really amazing person to work with, and I just want to appreciate everything he's done, and I see he's not up for reappointment currently, and just wanted to give a moment to say that I think he's been a very judicious and thoughtful person to be serving with, and has volunteered everywhere that we have asked him to. He has been at every meeting, our subcommittee meetings, comes voluntarily to some other additional meetings. I really have appreciated working alongside him. He is the second newest on our commission. Obviously, you're new now, but not unfamiliar. So I think, just to me, it was disappointing to see that we weren't going to have that incumbent coming back to serve with us. And so I just want to say, if he has a future opportunity, I hope you'll consider that and encourage you to think about that. Thank you so much.
Anybody else for public comment this morning? Step right up, Bob.
My name is Robert Stedman. I live at 1172 Knollcrest Court. Commissioner Jewett is my commissioner. I'm here just to say a few words. I know that later on you're going to be getting a review and a discussion from Ray Kendra, the architect of the new proposed senior center. I represent one of many who represent the seniors at the center and in the community. We have the corporation, the Senior Center Friends, that we formed to support the execution of the project, that is the building of the senior center. And I'm here this morning to indicate that we have been involved in proposals regarding financing of the structure, and we prepared a proposal with regard to that, along with a comparison of the financing that was used for the library. And rather than get into a discussion in 3 minutes or so on that, I brought along some copies of that, and I would hope that they could perhaps be distributed, and these are the statements of the proposal from our little corporation. We're hoping that you will approve down the road. Obviously, you have to hear other proposals, but we're hoping that you and the City Commission can get together to support a countywide millage, 1 mill in the spring or summer of 2020, which we propose as a one-and-done solution to build the building. 1 year, no revenue bonds, no interest, just 1 mill which pays for the structure, raises enough money to build it. With the money that we already have in hand, we can equip it. And so within essentially 1 year, we could be into construction of the building, whereas if we do the fundraising route, we're going to be 3 or 4 years down the road. I don't know who to give this to, but...
Just give it to the clerk.
Oh, thank you very much. There you go. And thank you very much for the
Thank you,
opportunity.
Bob. Thanks for all you do. Anybody else for public comment today? Morning, Dave.
Ring a bell.
Good morning, Dave Petrov, Interlochen. So just a quick one here regarding, we have the ethics and PAC money and election interference on today's agenda. In today's world where everyone is accusing everyone else about corrupting our democratic elections by nefarious antics, we need to step back and recognize that a big part of correcting the problem is stated in the biblical consideration of whose ox has been gored. It seems there is always more concern when we can point a finger toward sins of others. Accepting large donations of PAC money often results in a political victory, which leads to the mental justification that it was the right thing to do. Winning is perceived by the victors and those who voted for the winner as a good thing, no matter the means used to achieve the result. I doubt that anything will come of the resolution to avoid the perception of tax fund influence on local elections. It's a very long title there, Rob, for a resolution. Anyway, because the winning parties seldom change the rules they win by. Supporting the home team is always paramount, no matter how our team wins. Recall, this is the county that Larry Inman calls home, where he sat on the Grand Traverse Board of Commissioners for many years, then accepted large donations to fund his elections, accepted thousands of likes on Facebook from foreign actors in the country of Turkey, and enjoyed tens of thousands in PAC advertising from the Faith and Freedom Coalition in Fenton, Michigan. To get elected, all that certainly was not ethical, even if it was legal, but it verifies the goal is to win by any means. And it's obviously not a big step from there to accepting bribes and selling his vote to unions. It's hard to imagine passing such a resolution today when the same board won't even consider supporting the state legislative resolution calling for Larry Inman to resign months ago. If we call it a crime, the wrong ox may get gored. So I don't expect much to happen with this resolution today, but good luck. Take care.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else for public comment today? Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Beth Price, and do I state my address here? This is all
Yep.
new for me.
It's your
230.
choice.
Excuse me?
It's your choice.
Okay, 230 East 14th Street. I recently applied and interviewed for the Parks and Rec Board, and I want to thank you for your time. I just wanted to give a little feedback to the commission today. Although I I definitely trust that you recommended the right people for the board. I feel that the interviews were a little bit short. I was really pressed for time. I kept being reminded how much time I had left. I feel like I didn't have enough time to answer questions thoroughly. I also feel that I have this passion and I really want to get involved, and I feel like you had a lot of candidates that want to get involved. So I'm just up here to say that I hope you take that into consideration, that you have a lot of people that are concerned and that want to help protect our public or our county lands. And perhaps, moving forward, maybe you could, I know that all of you are pressed for time, that maybe you could use some of these applicants that didn't get chosen to get more involved. And I don't know how you would position them, but there are people out there, including myself, that really want to get involved. And this is all new for me. And I feel like, once again, I trust who you chose, but I'm kind of like, what do I do now? And there was no, what do you do next type of solutions in the email received. So it's just feedback. I hope that you consider it, and that's all I have.
Thanks,
Thank
Beth.
you.
Good morning.
Morning. Tom Busamra, 13482 South High Point Drive, Traverse City, and chair of Before, During, and After Incarceration, or as we fondly refer to it, BDAI. So just a brief, all I wanted to say today is to give you an offer of help. I didn't see it on the agenda, but I am assuming you're still considering the oversight of medical and mental health in the jail. And our offer today is that we would be happy to help develop an ad hoc committee, make suggestions to you of medical and mental professionals who might sit on an ad hoc committee and review the contract. We're so blessed, I think, to live in a community where we probably have more nonprofits per capita than most places on the planet. So I'm sure we could find a committee that would really thoroughly investigate and help you put to rest some of the concerns around liability and other things. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else for public comment today? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward in the agenda. Next is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any requests for additions or changes?
Yes,
Administrator Alger.
I am asking that we consider adding to the agenda the Veterans Affairs 2% application from Reigning Liberty Ranch and the 2% request from the Grand Traverse Pavilions.
Okay.
They did, there was some confusion about which, the pavilions, we thought they were going to go directly to the band. The pavilions thought they were coming through this board. And the Reigning Liberty Ranch application was received by the department on time. There was just some confusion between the department head and administration about what that application was to do at that point.
So we have pavilions, put this under new business, items C and D, pavilions and veterans, 2% request. There's no objection. Any other, or a motion to approve as amended?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the agenda as written with the two changes under new business of 11C with the 2% allocation for Grand Traverse Pavilion and the Reigning Liberty Ranch.
Support.
Okay. Moved by Jewett, supported by Hundley. Any discussion? All in favor?
Just,
Go
I
ahead.
do have discussion, just to note that the, I'm not sure why, but the airport presentation, airport governance ad hoc recommendation did not land in my email inbox until last night. Is there a
It
reason
was-
it wasn't in the
it
packet?
was mistakenly
haven't
left
had
out of
it
the
since-
packet.
I'm sorry?
Inadvertently left out of the packet. This is our first meeting using the new packet software, what's it called? iCompass. And for whatever reason, office staff didn't get it in the packet.
So I know the packet
apologize.
was posted Friday, but again, we did
Yeah.
not even receive
Yep,
the
we're not
presentation
making
till
any
Monday
final
night.
decisions today.
Right,
It's
but I
just
haven't even had a
present-
chance to read it, and I just
Okay.
want to note that. And I
That's
would like
fair
for
enough.
us to have,
Yep.
it's a pretty big decision. I would like us to have proper time to actually deliberate, so I just
Yep.
want to note that today. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We have our agenda. All right, next we have the consent calendar.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval, is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive, number 1, Michigan Township minutes of November 17th. Number 2, Treasurer's third quarter investment report. Number 3, expenditure report greater than $5,000. B, approvals. Number 1, October 2019 claim approval. Number 2, fiscal year 2019 budget amendments. Number 3, Commission on Aging addition of new cab vendor. Number 4, City of Traverse City recommendations for board appointments. Number 5, appointment recommendations, Parks, Airport, Human Services, and Veterans. Number 6, scrap tire cleanup grant. Number 7, recommendations for approval of 2% applications, Sheriff's Office, Goodwill Industries of Northern Michigan, Sheriff's Office Keys to Freedom Ministry, Sheriff's Office Crowd Control Gear, Parks and Recreation Native American Marker Tree, Resource Recovery TART, Recycle a Bicycle Program, Administration Conservation Resource Alliance, and Friend of the Court Safe Haven Program.
Okay. Would any members of the board, Commissioner Jewett?
A3 and B3?
A3,
Yeah.
the expenditure over 5,000 report, and B3, Commission on Aging.
Yep.
And the Friend of the Court, the Safe Haven program that's being recommended by the Friend of the Court is a program of Child and Family Services. So I think in the interest of time, the easiest thing is for me to just to abstain from the entire consent agenda rather than take it off. And so I'm planning to do that.
Okay. Commissioner Gafia?
B5, appointment recommendations, Parks, Airport, Human Services, and Veterans.
All right. Commissioner LaPointe?
Same one.
Okay. Okay, any others? Any members of the public wish anything removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. All right. Do we have a motion to approve with the exceptions of item A3, B3, and B5?
So moved.
So moved. Support.
Okay, moved by Klaus, supported by Kafia. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
LaPointe,
Yes.
Jewett,
Yes.
Hunley,
Abstain?
Kofia,
Yes.
Klaus,
Yes.
Wheelock, oops, he's not here, Henschel.
Yes. All right, motion carries. We're on to special orders of business. We have a public hearing for budget. So we'll open the public hearing for the budget at 8:19 a.m. And we will open the floor to public comment on the budget for 2020. If anyone would like to make a comment, please head up to the podium. Seeing none. Any commissioner comments on the budget? We're going to vote on it later in the meeting, but this is the part we talk about it, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Bott, would you be willing to just speak briefly to the adjustments you made to the budget, the Board of Commissioners budget specific to our per diem designation and the difference between last year and this coming, please?
Yes, I did in the summary, and it's hard to see because of the way that we aggregate the information, but the per diem amount for the Board of Commissioners, which is a separate department in the general fund, we had initially projected $50,000 based on what we've received and paid through the end of September. I took that number down to $35,000 in the 2020 budget, so that was a $15,000 reduction. I did increase the health insurance line item by $7,000, which is comparable to the amount that's in the 2019 budget. So those were the two major changes. there were budget amendments made to the 2019 budget, which took the number, the total budget up by about 20,000. So we are under the 6%. It's about a 1.5% increase for the Board of Commissioners budget, so.
And just year-to-date, our expenditure specifically on per diems towards that. It was originally recommended to do 50,000 next year. You brought it down. Where are we at right now with what we spent out on per
Year-to-date,
diems?
we're at 17,000.
Thank you.
So you're in line with, I don't expect it will go over the 35 in 2020.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know, it seems to me it might be helpful on the per diem form, since we have like different, let me step back and say thank you for making those adjustments, because I think that's helpful. And I was thinking that it would be helpful on the form, the per diem form. We've got 3 different buckets of classifications of expenses that we can bill. And there's committees that we're actually assigned to. There's like educational opportunities, and then there's kind of a 3rd bucket of discretionary things. And if we put on the per diem when we're submitting the expenses, if we identify what those are, that might help in the data gathering, budgeting process, and that you would have more information.
I would need to give that some thought. I don't have an issue with the way the form is designed now, but we could look at that.
Okay.
You're basically just asking to categorize.
Yeah.
We could do that, but I would want to give that some thought.
Okay.
And since this is the public hearing on the budget, state law does require us to indicate the millage rate that will be levied. And for the 2020 budget for the county general fund, we will levy 4.9019 mills to support the general fund, Fund 101 budget. And that is actually in the resolution that you may adopt later as well.
Okay. Anything else for the budget hearing? Yeah.
This being the time, then, I'm inclined to vote for the budget as presented at this point. I just want to kind of get on the record in regards to the prosecutor and sheriff's requests. I understand that there are true needs, and if over the coming months they can find ways of additionally funding, some of the positions that they were looking for, that if this passes, we're setting aside. If they can kind of meet us halfway and do some good work toward creatively solving the problem, I'm willing to look at that again down the road before the next year. And then the other thing I just wanted to say was about the process, I guess, was that I know many of the commissioners didn't want to hear from all of the department heads, have them come and give their requests, but I frankly personally feel like that decision was costly. And with full credit to Commissioner Kafia, she was very adamant throughout the thing that we should still hear from the departments. And anyway, at the 1 or 2 meetings ago, we had asked Ming to be here to be able to defend her requests. And she stood there at the podium ready to talk at why she needed a network administrator. And all I had to do, I looked at her, and all I had to do was say, Ming, would you say your piece? And I couldn't even make those words come out because I was trying to be congenial, and we all didn't want to, and we just wanted to move it on. And then it seems to me that within days after that, she had submitted her resignation. And I firmly believe that it was in part, maybe in large part, that it was because we didn't support her. And I own that, and I regret it. And I don't want us to lose other good staff because we as the commissioners think that we have all the answers and can't find the time to listen. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
And I will agree completely. I think we really need to think in future budget processes how we can have a little bit more respectful dialogue with the people who are here every day leading departments and know their departments intimately. I'm not questioning the administrator's recommendation, but I am saying, 2 heads are better than 1, and to Commissioner Hundley said, to have the department heads here ready to speak and then not allow them, I feel was disrespectful and costly. And I hope we are able to replace our IT director with someone of Ming's quality soon. But I know it took a really long time last time.
Okay, any other comments? Commissioner LaPointe?
I made a comment before when we were discussing the budget that we certainly don't have the expertise or the time that's spent by staff in looking at these budgets. And I don't want to get into a mode of micromanaging staff. We gave them direction, as I said before, and I think they fulfilled that obligation. I certainly think it is a stretch, unless you know otherwise, to imply that somebody resigned shortly after that meeting because we didn't give them the opportunity to speak. I spoke to her several times, one-on-one in terms of the budget and in terms of her department and her expenses. So she certainly has heard from us in that regard. So I just think it was an inappropriate comment to lay that on the board, that because we didn't give her the time to speak to us. And trust me, in the conversations I've had with her, and I've come from that sector, it's a very complex issue of the IT and the software and the hardware. And I really don't know what we as a board would add to that. So that's my 2 cents on the topic.
Fair enough.
Okay, any other issues for the budget hearing? If there are none, we will close the budget hearing at 8:27 a.m. and move on to our next agenda item, which is the Senior Center presentation with Ray Kendra. Welcome, good morning.
Thank you. Ray Kendra, Environment Architects in Traverse City. We've had the pleasure of working with staff and the folks at the Senior Center, so I'm excited to give you guys an update because there's been a lot of public input, and that's what we're trying to do, is just kind of bring everybody up to speed as to what's going on. So I will try to respect your time because I know you have a lot on your agenda, and I'll move relatively quickly, but at any time, please interrupt or ask questions. I want to try to get as much information as we can out to y'all. Let me just get my time here. Okay. So what I'll do is I'm going to start with the PowerPoint that we put together that summarizes the activity that's taken place so far. The biggest event that we had essentially was on September 11th. We had 2 sessions at the Senior Center that were attended by over 350 people. I know that Commissioner Henschel was there, so he's been to a few of the meetings, and I don't know if anybody else had the opportunity, but also the week after that, Lori, who runs the Senior Center, was able to conduct kind of an ongoing public input session, which this PowerPoint kind of summarizes that. So we were able to take a lot of good input, kind of put this data together so we have kind of real metrics about what we talked about, and we feel very good again about the input that was taken. So this is a picture of what that looked like those few days when we did those presentations. So what we did is we had a process that we called Dotocracy that we worked with another firm, and we wanted to collect as much information as we could. So the people who attended these sessions were given a presentation, but then they were also given little stickers to put on different boards to kind of vote for what their preferences were. So what we were trying to do in this process is to get input from the community as to what were the important features that this building should include. So we had that piece of it, and then we also had different site plan options that we looked at, and we wanted to get input on what folks felt were the most appropriate way to organize the site. And then the final thing that we had was just some images of different buildings, and we wanted to get an idea of what people thought about the character of the building. So that's what we're going to kind of look at, the results of what that was. So in starting, the first thing that we did back in August was to just look at the site organization and what was happening on the site. So these drawings that are up on the screen now just show kind of the existing situation. So we've got the existing building, we've got the existing tennis courts, shuffleboard courts, there is the parking area. There was this gravel parking lot that I didn't even know existed, but there's a curb cut on Front Street, and there was an old, it's beat up now, but a lot of people actually do use it as a parking for the beach. And then the beach was something that I have lived here for over 20 years, and I had no idea what a beautiful beach that really is there. So that was interesting to see all that and look at the different.
Don't tell anyone.
I
It's a
know, I
secret.
know. That's what I've learned over the course of this project. It was kind of, I always use the analogy of Maple Bay because Maple Bay was such a great place before people knew about that, and now people enjoy it, which is awesome too. So this document just kind of shows prevailing winds, the sun angles. What I like to always show people is that just the sun angle and how much it moves over the course of the year is very interesting. So I always like to include that slide on there, and that's what you're seeing with the orange sunspots here, and then the blue would be the winter sun angles. And then this slide here just shows some views and prominent views. So again, we've got the beautiful beach, and then kind of as we move closer to Front Street, and particularly the parking lots and so forth, are the less desirable pieces of the property. The shuffleboard courts we haven't, in anything we've looked at, we've left them as they are because they do have a historic designation to them, so we weren't touching those existing shuffleboard courts. So I will go through the site options that we presented, and I'll come back to this slide. So the first option that we looked at as to how we might organize the site was to put the building in the northeast corner, slide the pickleball tennis courts down to the south of the building so that the building would act as a windbreak, because right now the existing tennis court has a big banner that has a picture of the bay on it, which is cute, but it kind of blocks the bay of the view, or view of the bay. So this was trying to get the building over to the northeast corner, open up as much of the site as we could, and really open up that view to the water and to that beach. The second option, that we looked at, so we basically moved across from east to west on the property. So we looked at a two-story option that put the building in the middle, and again, these dimensions that we had were indicating how much openness were on the site based on the different configurations. The next version was moving a little bit farther to the west. This showed the option for the orange being a two-story building, and then those little brown wings that we show there would be if it was a single story. The existing building is 6,000 square feet. Through the programming process, we've kind of come up with a program that'll be about 13,000 square feet or so, but what you're looking at in these are about a 12,000 square foot footprint. So the idea was we wanted to see if it was feasible to keep that same 6,000 square foot that the facility is using right now, and it was determined that they're going to need at least to double that, and I think that we've come to a good solution, and I think that the folks who utilize the building are happy with what we've come up with the program in that 12 to 15,000 square foot range. And then the final version that we looked at was to put the building more on the west side, put the pickleball courts more along Barlow Street, and so that was the different site options that were presented at that time. And so the two site options that came out as the most popular were...
Ray, I'm going to interrupt you just a second.
Sure.
This was presented at a joint parks meeting between the city and the county. I've just forwarded that to all commissioners, so you can, if you want to zoom in on these, because they're kind of hard to see from our seats.
Thank you.
And I also emailed it to staff. Please have Mrs. Kramer add that to the website for this meeting.
Sure. Yeah, I did provide a PDF of this exact presentation too. So,
Okay.
So the two versions that came out on top were the A version, which was again in the northeast corner, and then the C version, which was more to the west. A big point of the A version that I think was very popular and well received was that part of the organization of the building in that location will allow us to keep the existing senior center operating during construction, because that gravel parking area that's off of Front Street and that curb cut will function as a construction staging and a construction access entry point. We won't have to take the existing senior center offline, which was a pretty big deal. So,
Hey Ray, can you tell us how many parking spots are included in these parking lots here? I mean, I see the square footage, but...
Yep, so the
Reynolds.
the existing parking is a little over 40 spaces. So this A version was looking at a little over 50 spaces. I'm going to show you a more developed site plan, because what we've done is as Commissioner Henschel mentioned, we went to the joint Parks and Rec boards and we presented this exact presentation to them, took some comments back from them, and I'll go over that. There was some comments as to the amount of parking and a few other items. So we're trying to address those. So I will show you towards the end of this presentation a more refined site plan, which we're currently pursuing at this point. So, But there's approximately, again, a little over 50 in this version. They're all quite close to the same amount, as about 50 to 60 spaces were what we were proposing. There's a few that had a little bit more. This one was a little over 60. So then when we got to the program choices, the different things, and again, these are very small, so I'll just kind of walk through them, and if you have the opportunity to look online to see a little bit closer. But basically what we presented were slides that showed different features that we wanted the public input to kind of gauge what was most important to folks. So the different things that we put up there were the senior adult lounge was one space, which is kind of like a library game reading type space. Community event hall, which would be where lunch programs or food programs would take place, but it would also be a potential event space. Commercial kitchen was on the list of things. Then there was, oops, I'm sorry. The classrooms that would have different functions. So we had classrooms that could be used for art type activities, conference spaces, club uses. Just there's, Lori had mentioned there's over 125, and I don't ever get this number right, but it's a substantial number. There's a lot of different user and interest groups within the senior center, which I had no idea that that was the case. So providing space for those different activity groups. We looked at the possibility of an indoor pickleball or badminton type court. The situation with that, though, is to get the proper clearances and so forth. It really requires quite a large building and footprint and head height and so forth. So that was just something that we did present, though, as a potential option. There's a lobby space, which obviously would not be something that we asked them to vote on, but then we also had more health and wellness type spaces, so smaller rooms similar to what we might have at the health department, where they'd be either used for exams and some small medical types of activities that take place, but also tax, legal, consulting, and that sort of thing. We had the outdoor courts on there. We had an outdoor seating area, and then we had a rooftop garden type of space or rooftop access space if it was a two-story facility. So out of that presentation, the things that came to the top were the community events hall was the highest vote getter, followed by the covered porch, which was kind of a new program item that, you know, people had ideas about, but never really visualized, I think, in previous iterations of exploring this. And then the senior adult lounge, the multi-purpose classrooms, and then the outdoor court spaces were all kind of behind there. So those were the top 5 elements. Things like that indoor activity space fell a little bit farther back, as well as things like the consultation rooms, and then the rooftop terrace was, I think, at the bottom there. So then the last thing that we did is we looked at some building character examples. So we just took some images from different projects that we had worked on, or our partner firm had worked on, or just some other images we'd found. So what we show here is just the different sessions and then what came out during each of those sessions. So the first one, you see the building, and then I can just flip through these, and again, it'd be much easier to look at these presentations online a little closer if you're interested to see the different looks of the buildings and so forth. So what we came up with then is these different buildings that took the most votes throughout the course of that week, and then those September 11th presentations. So what we tried to do is we're just using this to help inform the look of the building as we move forward, which I'll show you some 3D models of what we started to create. But the thing that I found kind of interesting is that there was a lot of elements of the existing building in these different images that they kind of looked at. So we've kind of picked that up and using some hip roofs and using some different forms that you actually have on the existing building. So I think that we're leaning towards a solution that will combine a lot of these looks, but it'll actually play off the existing, which we think is kind of neat too, because I think people like that building a lot. I think it's just the fact that it's too small for the activities that need to take place. So after the meeting that we had with the joint Parks and Recs boards, this is the site plan that we're currently working on, and we are literally, you know, we have a meeting today that we're going to be exploring trees and some different things. So this is an ongoing process. It's not meant to be a final plan by any stretch of the imagination, but we're certainly starting to refine and kind of bring this down to a direction that we're pursuing. So this is following that option number 1, which was the consensus both at the public input sessions and as well at those board meetings. So this shows the building in the northeast corner. One of the things that was requested was we have a 50-foot setback from the water's edge. That's the code setback, if you will. One of the suggestions was to look at the building being pushed back a little further. So this reflects that, and it's showing the building placed about 75 feet back from the water's edge. So that was in response to some of those comments. And that had to do with, there's some trees up in the upper right-hand corner, and that we were trying to save and keep that existing buffer in place on the beach there and still make it a very nice space for how folks will be able to engage and utilize the beach. This shows kind of down around this bottom here, and I don't know if you can see my mouse moving there, but the existing parking, what we're looking at doing, when we originally presented this, we actually had kept the existing parking intact, and then we had included a new parking area, and we were pushing upwards of 80 parking spaces. With what they have right now, they're deficient, but we're looking to get to a compromise parking count, so we'll continue to work on that, but we did show the half of the existing parking being removed, and then we kind of reoriented the new proposed parking. So we're showing a little over 60 spaces in this iteration, and the idea was to create, a nice circulation core. But then all of the versions that we looked at, we also had looked at a covered drop-off area. So whether it be for folks being dropped off by their companions or Beta or other public transit, that would be the idea, is that we're going to have a covered drop-off, and that's what you're seeing with that rounded area. The location of the courts, we put it behind the building because, again, the building will then act as the windscreen instead of having to, create a windscreen on the bay. The idea would be that the building would act as the windscreen. And then the key point was that we're opening up a lot of view to that bay and to that beach. So the thought with increasing the parking is, again, not only are they deficient right now for the senior center activities, but we think that, unfortunately, you will see a little bit more folks accessing that beach and wanting to use that property. So we think it's prudent to certainly consider that. The Barlow Street and the parking there is not part of the project that we're working on, so we were engaged only to deal with what's happening on that senior center parcel. But there is, has been discussion that in the future, they'll likely be looking at the activity and arrangement of what's happening out there on Barlow Street, but that is not part of our project at this point. And then another big key point that came out was just, the green space, it is a park and not losing trees. So one of the things that we're grappling with and why we're going to be looking at trees today is just as we slide the building in different directions, it's going to impact trees. So we're trying to get to a point where we can say this is how many trees we are impacting. But as an example, by moving the building down 25 additional feet to the south meant that the courts had to move down 25 feet to the south, which means the potential for a few of those trees along Front Street to get impacted. So we're kind of playing this game right now where we're trying to get everything organized in such a way that we can be most efficient and not take away more trees than we need to, because we realize that that's very important for everybody in the community. So that was a big part of what had come out of the joint meeting. And the other thing I'll point out is that the plan has a couple restrooms that were provided for the beach access. There actually is that facility available right now at the existing building, so that was something that was requested that we continue to maintain. So we are showing 2 restroom facilities that would be accessed from the exterior that would help to service the beach. I think that was the key points there. And then the floor plan, just to give you a brief look at what's going on here. So again, we have the covered entry in the middle of the floor plan here coming into a lobby. The red space would be that senior adult lounge space we talked about, which would then have access to a nice covered porch. So all that would be focused on that primary north view of the bay. As you move to the west side here, the gold colored space would be the multi-purpose kind of dining spaces, with the green area being a commercial kitchen. So the idea with that gold space is we were looking at how many people that would accommodate. Right now it is designed to accommodate about 150 people. And the idea would be that there would be foldable partitions that would make 3 separate spaces of about 50 people each, or again, it could be a space for 150 people. That has very nice orientation and views to the water as well. So really, all the public spaces are oriented along the water. And then as you move down to the south and to the east, the blue areas are the administration type functions. So the reception counter, office space, some conference space. And then as you move down into the purple areas, those are some small classrooms that would be for those different user groups. There's some storage associated with those, potentially sinks so they could have art activities and that sort of thing. And then we are showing one right now with a movable partition as well, so that those spaces would be flexible and we could have more activities such as movement classes and yoga and whatnot that would happen there. And then across the bottom, there's also 2 restrooms that would be closer to the courts. Those would be in the building, and they would also service the classrooms, but they were in close proximity to those courts, so folks could be able to access restroom facilities adjacent to the courts. And then the 2 bathrooms on the far west side that you're seeing there's a little covered portico and then bathroom space there. So the last thing I will show you is the 3D model that we've been working on. So this shows you kind of the existing configuration of the site. So existing building, tennis courts, shuffleboard courts, parking, the Barlow Street access, and then that is that access that I was mentioning off of Front Street there. The option that we're pursuing, and so this was the original proposal that was presented to the Parks and Rec Commission, so you can see that there's a little bit more parking. In our current iteration, we are taking this southern piece of the existing parking, and we just slightly adjusted the orientation of the building in this parking lot, so it kind of lines up with that existing parking lot there. Again, the tennis courts on the south side, and then this kind of just looks at the building, and then this shows you kind of the space in relation to the beach. So these are the dining type event spaces, and then that porch area out on the back. Just kind of gives you an overview. So that is what I have for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or anything else that anybody might like to know.
All right, any questions, anybody?
Probably not your firm or whatever, but has anybody figured out what it's actually gonna, how much additional money it's gonna cost to operate this between maintenance and utilities and everything? Because it obviously is a bigger structure. There's gonna be, over a period of time, more maintenance and more utilities,
Correct.
more snow removal, all that stuff.
We have not explored that as of yet, but I think that that would certainly be something that would be part of the process moving forward. So we would be doing some additional cost estimating, but then also trying to get a handle on some of those operational costs as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anything to add?
You also have Lori Wells from the Senior Center and Chris Erickson from the Parks and Recs Department, if they would like to say anything, or commissioners have questions of them or the seniors.
Go ahead.
I've got one general question. When you were proposing this to the public and, getting their desires on what they would like, what facilities they would like, what amenities, was there a target project cost that you were trying to work within, or was it just, we'll lay it out and whatever it is, or do you? Because obviously I would think some of these designs are more expensive than other designs, but can perhaps provide the same utility. So was cost a factor in any of this discussion?
Sure. I mean, cost is always a factor, but what we wanted to do is at least look at programmatically, because I think that was the bigger concern, is that the growing population of seniors, and then the fact that when we do something, we're going to see increased usage. And so that was something that we did talk about. We're seeing wild fluctuation in building costs right now, which is also a difficult thing. So it's really, we're using a number of around $300 a square foot as just a base cost, because that's where we're seeing different projects of similar scale come in. So when you do the math on a 6,000 square foot building, you're looking at $1.8 million, and then it'd be closer to $4 million for the 12,000 square foot version. So as we move forward, and certainly as funding and so forth gets explored, we're going to have to look at it. But I think the reality that was determined that independent of cost, a 6,000 square foot building was not going to be sufficient for the needs of the senior center. So when we had been hired to do the project, that was one of the things that they started out with, is that we had to give them some fees for 6,000 and a 12,000 square foot building. In this process, it was pretty much determined by the entire group that it was going to be closer to the 12,000, that the 6,000 wasn't going to work out. And in previous studies and things that had been done had actually even greater square footage. So we were able to work together with everybody and kind of bring that down to what we all felt was a realistic kind of compromise number, but still meet the needs of the senior center.
So what are we, at the 12,000 square feet for the whole project, I mean, I assume those costs you're talking about are for the structure itself, but then you've got...
There'll be site costs, professional fees, and so, again, we'll have to develop, now that we're getting to a point where we have consensus on a floor plan and we're coming to a direction on a site plan, we'll be able to start refining costs in the next period of time. So that's the intention, because right now we don't know if we're going to have 80 parking spots or 60 parking spots. Are we going to put new tennis courts or 2 tennis courts? So there's a lot of things that we're still determining that will affect the cost, but we believe from a square footage standpoint we're heading in the direction of a 12 to 15,000 square foot building.
So this is basically just to update us, see where we are along the process, and then what does the rest of the process look like? What's the next step that we should keep an eye out for?
That's something that I'm going to have to defer to Nate.
I can answer that.
Okay.
This is a up-to-date progress as a result of something that we've been going through since mid-2018 and the senior center staff has been doing for decades. In September of 18, the City Commission and the County Board of Commissioners met and jointly resolved to cooperatively work together to come up with a design and build a new senior center at that location. There were also a couple other resolutions that dedicated funding to the process. So this is the presentation of progress to date in that project. And next step, I believe, is Ray will be presenting to the City Commission as well. And we'll go from there. We are still in the process of working with the city on the agreement on how we manage the relationship between the city and the county as specific to the senior center as well.
So just to be clear, the senior center is a city park.
Right.
They can't, sell the property to us and we build it. They can't even technically lease it to us, from what I understand, according to the city attorney. So there is a countywide millage to run senior center activities at all county senior center locations, and there are several. This being the most popular. It's used by not only city residents, but a lot of, basically, there's a big circle of people.
Sure.
So it gets a little sticky because we're talking about a county-wide millage, so people in Fife Lake or Interlochen are contributing towards a center in that is a city park. So our part in the partnership is program. And so we have to figure out how we're going to balance that, and I think those discussions are still ongoing.
Yeah, and to that point, I believe when we did the tour and we've looked into all the great things that our senior center provides, there was some breakdown of those seniors in the city and the city's part of the county. It's always good to remember that. What's the breakdown of city residents to county residents who come and use this particular? It does happen to be a city park, but I know it's also the center where your hospital appointment, your grocery, many reasons that folks come in from around the county. So can you speak to the breakdown of non-city resident to city resident use of this main senior center?
Yes, I'm Lori Wells, manager for the Senior Center Network. And it's interesting, we do have computer software that we track everyone who comes in and out of the building, so they scan their card like you do when you go into a fitness center or something. And the people that are members, we have their township, so we can track where they're coming from. And it's been about a month ago, Commissioner Henschel asked for a complete breakdown, and it took me a little while to get accurate with that, but it's astounding to me that it's the same within a couple of percentage points today than it was almost 20 years ago, and it's about 25%, 26% city residents, and the rest for the most part, come from various parts throughout the county. We have about 240 that come from Leelanau County, and then we have a scattering from Antrim, Benzie, but it's pretty much 25% city, 75% Grand Traverse County outside of the city.
Non-city. Yeah.
But I do have a complete breakdown that I'm so excited to be able to share with you, that you can share with the rest of the commissioners, because in the early days when I first came to the senior center, the townships used to pay money to the senior center for operations before we became part of the county, and so that was based on a percentage. So I would say to Garfield Township, okay, of the 75% of people that are not city residents, 23% of those are Garfield Township, so would you pay 23% of the budget? And that's how we were funded for years and years. So we really, and that was when we kept track of people by sticks. You know, okay, you walk in the door, you're from Garfield, you're from Acme. Literally, someone, that was their job, was to count those sticks. And those, so the percentages are still the same. I was astounded by that, but.
Thank you, that's helpful perspective.
Yeah. Commissioner Jewett.
Hey, Lori, when you say 240 approximately come from Leelanau County, is that 240 different people, or was 240 visits?
240 different people,
Okay.
unduplicated count.
So when you look at the 240 and you put the percentages, the 75, 25%, whatever, what is our total number that actually?
I have 13,800 and some
Wow.
people in our database that we have their address, we know where they came from.
How many are actually members, or whatever
We
you
had
called it?
over 6,000 last year actually came and participated in an activity on a somewhat regular basis. But we try to keep track of everybody who comes to us. They might come to us for our Project Fresh program, where we give them coupons to use throughout the year, and that might be the only reason they come. They might have went on one trip with us. So we have, that's how you get up to that 13,000. But there were over 6,000 unduplicated people who came to us on somewhat of a regular basis last year.
Oh, and you know them all by name?
Pretty much. This is Dick, Bob, Will.
Thanks, Lori.
And Lori, do you have similar information about the other locations?
That's including the other locations. That's the participation rate of the entire senior center network. But we do keep track of how many people just go to Interlochen, and I can break down anything, but I haven't pulled that data separately. But I can tell you how many people come from Leelanau County that went to Interlochen, but I don't.
It would, I think, be helpful to see that by site, I think.
You do want to see that by site?
And if it's remotely viable, if it's a 1,000-hour project, it's not worth it.
It's not a $1,000 project,
but to the extent I know that it'll keep coming up, like we've
Sure.
already said today. If we're talking about a millage county-wide, people will want to know specifically, people outside of the city really are using that facility, not just contributing to the network as a whole. I think it'll probably be important.
Yeah, and there's there's crossover. People who live in Interlochen will go to Interlochen, but they also come into town.
Sure.
We certainly see people that, like this, I think it was mentioned earlier, they come to town for doctors, for groceries and whatnot, and so they plan their visits to town to match up with their mahjong date or their bridge game or whatever. So the satellite locations are supported by the Traverse City office for sure. So.
Okay.
Okay. So one more question, Lori. I'm sure you told us during our visit, but what are the hours of operation there?
Well, right now our hours are Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30, but we have user groups and different things that happen after hours almost every night of the week that our facility. So it's like the table tennis group, the beekeepers club, the stitching groups, Weavers Guild, and that kind of thing that aren't necessarily, we don't have staff and office hours during those hours, but there's someone in the building and they're participating in some sort of an activity almost every day of the week, including the weekends.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And I'm one of those people who loves the Senior Center Beach. I walk my dog down there a lot. But I've noticed that weddings, various activities happen out on that front lawn, as well as it seems like in the building as well. Can you speak to is that a revenue generator, and where does that money go, if so?
Yeah, so on the beach, that's because it is a city beach, they actually reserve the beach through the city, and there's no charge for most of those things. If they're a low impact activity, they don't have to pay for that, but they kind of get on the books so that you don't have two girls trying to get married on the same beach at the same time. So it lets them know what's going on. And oftentimes they'll reserve the building because of this current situation of our building, we don't get a lot of like, we'll have our reception in your building, although we've had a couple of those. But the brides want to get ready in the building, or they keep it as a staging area, that type of thing. So right now, we have a fair amount of those kind of rentals, but we have more like family reunions are big. We'll use, and they'll rent the building as a rain option. And then we have different businesses in town that will rent space to have a like a financial seminar in the evening. So we charge them to rent the space. So that money goes into our general operating costs because we generally provide a staff person to be in the building. We used to not do that, and but it's just gotten more popular that it's not really a good idea to not have a staff person there. But I'm very excited about the opportunity to generate revenue in a new building because I think we'll be a very popular rental spot for a lot of different purposes. And whether they pay rent or not, I mean, I envision us being open to the community to do, you know, other nonprofit groups that are gathering and need a place to be. There'll be room for them in this building, so I see it being heavily utilized by outside user groups.
And I think it's something we could also note is that the senior center network is open to people who aren't seniors as well. It's just focused on seniors. So for,
Sure.
for
Yeah,
a small
we don't
fee,
deny-
anyone can join the network and participate.
Yes, it throws the seniors off a little bit when a 30-year-old shows up for euchre on Friday night. But I just let them know if they pay their $10 dues, because you do have to pay if you're under 60 to be a member. But we love to have those mixed ages in the center, of course.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you so
No,
much.
thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is that it, Ray?
Yes, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. All right. We will move on in the agenda to item 8, items removed from the consent calendar. We're going to take them in order. First one is A3, expenditure report of items over $5,000. This is page 13 in the packet. Commissioner Jewett requested the removal of this.
Yeah, I just had a question on the engineering for generator. There's 2 of them on there. Was there engineering for 2 different generators?
I believe there was. This was a DPW request. There were 2 different sites, I believe,
Okay.
Commissioner Jewett. The $75,000 was inclusive of a generator and engineering. And then I think the engineering work for the other, the $15,000 amount was for a separate site.
Okay. I figured they were probably separate, but I just wanted to make sure they were. I see there are 2 different engineering firms and everything, so. Okay. Thank you, Nate.
And I had a question on this, on the $74,000. These are approved by the DPW board prior to coming to the administration for approval of the purchase order. So I did inquire about the difference in cost, and one was, again, the generator and the site work, and one was specifically site work.
These are generators, I'm assuming, for pump stations or something like that?
I believe that is the case for Acme Township.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else on this topic? I saw the jury chairs were in there.
So I did return to the court a request that, and I cited the purchasing policy to them, indicating that this has to be in the best interest of the county. The court did respond that they did believe they were in concurrence with the purchasing policy.
Okay. And these are $1,000 plus chairs each?
I didn't do the math right
Okay.
today, but yes, looks like it, yeah.
How bad were the old chairs? Goodness. All right. Bonnie probably knows. She's over there.
I didn't know their chairs were that expensive.
Yeah. With ottomans. So, okay, we'll move on. Oh, we need to receive and file. Motion to receive and file.
So move.
Support.
Okay. Moved by Jewett, supported by Coffea. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, approvals B3, Commission on Aging, addition of new cab vendor, page 40 in the packet. Commissioner Jewett once again.
Yeah, I just had a question here. The recommended approvals it's for budgeted years 2019 and 20, but I see the contract goes through 22. Is this through 10/29/22? Is this normal to just have it budgeted but have a contract this long?
I am Cindy Kinlan with the Commission on Aging. Yeah, this contract is really just about them accepting our vouchers. We historically have never gone over our budget, so the budget's kind of tied to that, and we limit it, as we limit how many actually vouchers each person can purchase. But, you know, again, it's just really a contract to, that they will accept our vouchers from our clients.
Yeah, my question though is, like I said, you do have the budgeted for 2 years, 19 and 20, and the contract here goes through 22. Does that not matter, or is it
So
okay?
it would be incumbent upon the Commission on Aging to know that that contract exists and to ensure that the 2021 and 2022 budgets reflect the appropriate amounts for the contract itself.
Okay. That's all I had questions on.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Oh, sorry.
Moved by
Shut up.
Hundley, supported by Jewett.
Support, yep.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on to item B5, under approvals, appointment recommendations for parks, airport, human services, and veterans. Page 48 in your packet, Commissioner Coffea and LaPointe. We'll start with Commissioner Coffea.
So this was my first experience being on these committees, selecting or recommending doing these interviews. And I guess I just wanted to give some feedback and offer to be a part of perhaps a committee that thinks about how we can professionalize those experiences for the members of our community who are applying for the positions. Yeah, I think that there are some improvements that we could make to the process, and it did feel uncomfortable to me as well that we, in certain folks' case, were actually sort of rushing them along and even standing up and telling them they were done. It didn't feel professional. I didn't feel comfortable with the way that we were interacting with these folks who are volunteering, and these positions can be quite substantive. I mean, they're making decisions, for example, maybe recommending that the airport go from a commission to an authority, or making major decisions, recommendations to the community about DHHS or the pavilions. I think that we are appointing people to positions with a lot of responsibility, and I would like us to work with administration to think about how we can tighten up that process and maybe modernize it a little bit so that the experience feels a little more professional and comfortable for everyone involved. And that is not a critique of anyone. I just think we should look to improve the process.
All right, Commissioner LaPointe.
I pretty much agree with Betsy. As my first occasion also, in 10 minutes wasn't adequate, but I realized we have a number of candidates, and we couldn't, trying to schedule the people in, it's a much larger job, and we're appointing people for 3- and 4-year terms, so it is significant. Also asking everybody the same question, for some, I mean, it needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
But I will say, it's like say the first time I've been a participant, and the quality, the number of candidates, I was surprised at how many, because initially the report we got, I was actually contacting some people and say, hey, you better get your application in. But we had a number of candidates, number of quality candidates, so it was a tough decision. Just a comment, Betsy and I were on the same one, along with Ron, on DHS and Department of Veterans Affairs, and we had 3 or 4 candidates in really good candidates that we could have chosen from. And as it turned out, we selected 3 new people. So I always think it's good to get turnover on these boards. You get a different perspective. I think we went for the most qualified individual that we felt that might actually augment the rest of the board. But I want to just make a comment. So there's 3 members that were on the board that are no longer be on DHS, or one on DHS. Rodetta Herod, who's done an outstanding job. She's been on that board for a number of years, and it was a tough decision not selecting her again. With Department of Veterans Affairs, John Block has been on that for a number of years, and he actually took himself out of the running for health reasons that had come up from the time he applied. So he's done an outstanding job. And Bill Fowle, who is also on Department of Veterans Affairs. So as it turned out, I would have never thought going in that we were going to come up with, replace all the incumbents, because the normal course of action is if they're going to apply, you just roll forward. So again, I agree with the comment that was made by the public, that the 10 minutes, you don't really get a chance to present yourself. So I agree that we probably have to take a look at it, but on the same hand, it's going to take a lot more coordination, a lot more of our time than what we've spent in the past, so that's my only point.
Got two people possibly
Well,
on a committee.
I too find this process cumbersome and difficult. I didn't have any better ideas, and this is what staff gave us, so, you got, short of an all-day seminar where you're talking to people for a half-hour piece, because you got so many people. If you got ideas, I'm really curious.
Perhaps we can form an ad hoc to look at this specifically. Think about this, we have 83 counties in Michigan. I'm sure there are best practices we could look to. Think about perhaps being more directive with staff about what we need from them. We only do this once every, how often, Nate?
Year.
We're
Every
needing
year.
to go through this process.
Annually.
Right, annually, okay. So I think it might take some work up front for us to get together and come up with maybe a template that gives a guide and also thinks through staff time. Maybe we need a person like we've had on the ethics ad hoc. Kit was with us and worked through with us. So I know it's a lot, and it's a good problem to have because we have so many engaged members of our community. But I think it's worth doing to think through and professionalize the process and have something that the next group, whether it's us or someone else, can have and follow and just put our best face forward.
Yeah. All right. So this item is, do we have a motion to approve these appointments?
Mr. Chairman,
So
I'd make a motion to approve the appointments under B4, or B5, I'm sorry, for Parks, Airport, Human Services, and Veterans Boards.
Okay. Moved by Jewett. LaPointe, did you say support?
Support?
Okay. I thought I heard you say something. All right. Moved by Jewett, supported by LaPointe. Any further discussion on the appointments? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item B, that's all of them.
That's it.
All right, we'll move forward with department items. This is item 9 on the agenda. A, Finance Department Bond Ratings, Information and Discussion, page 113 in the packet.
What I'd like to do here, as a result of the refunding of the 2012 series bonds, which were the health services building up on the Frenier, we did have board approval to refund and issue a new series of bonds, and we did realize a significant savings in the interest cost on the remaining bonds. But as that, to do that, we have to have a rating done, and we will switch. We'll use S&P at one rating, and then next time we would use Moody's. But the rating analysis is included in your packet, and I also provided the annual update from Moody's. And if you do have just a moment, if you look at page 118, they're very direct with us. If you look at, I think I gave you the wrong page. Page 119, down at the bottom, the paragraph on the credit overview, I just wanted to bring your attention to that. I did mention in the summary that we have a very strong credit rating with one weakness, and that is the pension obligation. So that's, certainly don't want to hide that. But they do address that in the bottom sentence. And I think what's important there is you have shown and demonstrated a commitment to fund those liabilities at a rate greater than our actuaries would require us to. And their concern is that we would waver from that commitment. I don't have that concern. I think you've demonstrated that you're very committed to stay ahead of that pension obligation. And then if you turn to page 126.
Dean, can I just ask you a question? On 119 is the first time it came up, it was mentioned throughout as in terms of pension, and pension was thrown throughout this thing. That's the big hit we got on this thing. But they come up with the actuarially determined contribution. I'd never seen that.
That's the new terminology for GASB 68 and GASB 74 and 75.
How does that line up is there any tie to that in the annual required?
That amount is actually, it is the terminology that's used in the actuarial valuation. That is the minimum payment that you need to pay to fund that liability over the amortization. That's the new term. It used to be the actuarial, the ARC payment. They've just changed the terminology.
So you're saying the ARC and what they refer to as the ADC is one and the same?
Yeah, the new accounting standards regarding pensions use the ADC. They're not the same.
Okay, they're not this. They can't be the same.
They used to refer to a term called ARC, which was the actuarially required contribution. Now they've gone to the ADC. It's a similar concept. It's that amount that you need to pay in on an annual basis to fund that liability, provided they hit all of their assumptions. That's the key.
Okay, there's a big...
They used to use a term called ARC.
I know.
And the
but
new
thing
terminology
is,
that's...
But here's the concern I have. If they're saying you need to make your ADC, and the ADC was the same as the ARC...
It's not the same thing.
Okay, so it's a different value
It's a different
completely.
valuation based on the new pension standards to make sure that you're funding that pension
Is
according...
MERS going to start using...
They have been using the ADC. The 2017 valuation, the 2018 valuation, they may have been using it even prior to that. They generally adopt the accounting standards earlier than required.
Okay. My only point is we've been making our ARC payment for all these years, and we've gotten ourselves into a big hole.
That is correct. But in 2015, for the first time, I don't know who, Ron may have been on the board, it was the first time members from MERS told you that that was the minimum payment. You know, I think they have some responsibility for, you know, their annual valuation did say if you make the ARC payment, you're on track. Well, come to find out, making the ARC payment didn't have us on track, so.
Okay.
But I think what I want to point out, both ratings, the actual rating that we did for the refunding bonds, and then the update, the comment by Moody's, they both indicate that we have very strong credit, but the one weakness is the pension obligation. They mentioned the OPEB too, but the OPEB is relatively small. So again, if you can, when you have a chance, read that credit overview paragraph on page 119 for the S&P rating, and then on page 126 for the Moody's comment. There's a credit overview up on the top of there, but they both do address the weakness being the pension obligation, and their concern with the formal rating that was done that you would waiver from your commitment to fund that. I don't see you wavering from the commitment to fund, and your pension policy has you funding ahead of that. We had a significant discussion with them because their initial report said that we didn't have a plan. And both the treasurer and I strongly opposed how they had written this report. And we spent about an hour on the phone with them saying, here's our plan. We provided them with the pension policy. We showed them the additional payments that were made this year, and they acknowledged that you do have a plan to fund ahead of schedule.
Yeah, I mean, the way I read it, and you have more experience, I'm sure, with these ratings, but they were identifying it as of all of the things in the county that we are dealing with, that's the largest risk that's out there, and danger, but that we were adequately addressing it, or maybe more than adequately addressing it. So I read it as an acknowledgement of a thing that we need to be concerned about, but that we were doing a good job. I don't know if
they're very they're not going to, if I try to persuade them to water it down,
yeah.
I don't have that influence.
Right.
And you can see from, and that's why we wanted to provide this to you. It's clear that that's their concern. They do acknowledge that there's a very strong commitment. We have the reserves, we're making the payments, we're paying ahead of that ADC, And we just need to keep our eye on the plan. Every year, we need to take a look at it to make sure we're on track. I know that's administration, that's our plan, and I do know from what this board has done to this point, I don't see that we will waver from that commitment.
Dean, could you talk about the bond rating spectrum a little bit? This is a AA2. I've heard of A, AA, AAA. What do the numbers mean?
Well, the numbers, we're not at the highest rating.
AAA would be the highest.
There are a few counties, if you look at counties, Oakland and Ottawa, and Kent County probably had that AAA. We could move to AAA once we have the pension under control. You know, we're not at the 60%. When you get into that higher, funded level, 75 and above, we will probably move to the higher rating.
But didn't we have a AAA in 2011, 2012?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I thought at one point
we've been at this rating for quite a while. They also look at the size. We're not a large county government by any means, but all of the other factors that they look at are very positive, very favorable. And that pension obligation is the one weakness that keeps us from moving it. And they do address that too. Once we've done a better job of having that liability funded, they would upgrade the rating.
And what does that rating mean to our county in terms of dollars and cents?
The significance of the rating, and I will bring the results of that refunding bond issue back to you at the next meeting, but it means that we're able to borrow at lower rates of interest, and we have shown over time, and we can, we'll try to quantify that, but it basically means that you're going to be able to borrow at a lower rate of interest, which means you have a lower cost, whether it's a sewer project for the townships or it's a building that the building authority, builds or
That was another question, is how far does this bond rating reach? Because we have Hospital Finance Authority, we've got townships, BPW, what?
Well, if it's a Board of Public Works issue, they're going to attach, or they would want to use the county's rating. The city will have their own rating done. The Hospital Finance Authority, we do a little bit different process there. But, we have a very, last year when we looked at the Blair Township, it was a small issue, but it was rated based on the county's overall credit rating. So that township benefits from our credit rating, as do any other township, whether it be a sewer or water issue, even the county issues. The refunding that was done, because we have such a good rating, we probably saved anywhere from 0.5% to 0.75%, and over, on $1 million bond issue, those numbers add up. So,
yeah. So I just want to state that as time goes on, as a commission, we deal with a lot of different issues, and I don't want us to lose sight of how important funding our pension is, because that affects our bond rating, which in turn affects other local governments in our community that benefit from a strong bond rating at the county. So it's just one more reason to keep our eye on the ball, despite all the other things we deal with. So.
If we were a credit risk, when we went to sell a bond issue or refund a bond issue, you would have very little interest in Grand Traverse County's debt, whether it be a new debt or a refunding. That's not the case. We usually have anywhere from 5 to 12 financial institutions that will bid, and it does. I mean, that competitiveness helps us get the best rate possible. And keep in mind, in the market, the rates can change. I mean, last year with what was going on overseas with the trade wars, that does have an effect. Interest rates, and like I said, you'll see this when I bring that refunding analysis back, but I believe the present value savings and the real dollar savings were about $400,000 just by lowering the interest rate on a bond issue that we currently have.
I would like to point out, Commissioners, that these ratings, they draw out your commitment to the pension, and they say strong management, they say strong budgetary performance, they draw out the 25% fund balance policy is all positive. measures that we have taken as a county to ensure that we are addressing the financial status of the county. So it is important to know.
Great. All right, we ready to move on? Oh, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions. The numbers in here, is this based on 2018 year-end numbers that they do their analysis?
Yes, but they talk to us about the budget, how we're doing with the
Okay.
2019 budget. They also talk about what we're proposing for 2020. They cover
Okay.
just about everything.
But the numbers in here reflect year-end, 2018
Yeah,
year-end?
they're going to look primarily at where we ended 2018, and they do look primarily at your general fund, but they also look at the tax revolving fund and the fund balances that you have. We provide them with our audit report and a whole bunch of other information.
To keep focused on the pension, as you said, and the importance on all this, I guess the thing I remain confused on is in this, they're looking at MERS and they're saying we're 48.5% funded. When we get from MERS, they show us, I think, 53% funded. I wish we'd have some consistency, and I know the difference, but one document you'll read and the public will look at it and say, we're 48% funded. The next one you look at, it's 53% funded. And I understand the smoothing and actual, but my take is we should stick with one number. And I think the actual is what we should use. It's 48.5% funded, if that's what the number is. Then that's the only way you can really look at truly what your pension liability is. So anyway, just a comment on that. I get confused. I'm sure the public gets confused when we keep raising this issue of the importance of the pension and we keep giving different numbers. So.
All right, if we want to make it look good, we talk about how much we have with interest or expected interest. But if we want to send a report to the state, it's got to be, what is it at without the
We
expected
just should be
interest?
consistent. We understand you can look at it different ways, but just some
I agree.
If we want any credibility, we need to be consistent. One other quick question on page 127. They talk about the available fund balance as a percent of operating revenue and the net cash balance as a percent of operating revenue. I think I know what the difference might be, why in one case we're 50% fund balance, the other's 35. But can you just explain the difference between those two numbers?
So you're on page
127.
Not sure what you're looking at.
I'm sorry, under finances, available fund balance. We talk a lot about fund balance. We talk about 25%. We want to have a 25% fund balance.
What they're looking at, they're obviously not looking at just our general fund. They're looking at probably, for the most part, the governmental fund, so they're taking into consideration.
Is that the 71 million?
Yeah, they're looking at more, and they may even, I'd have to actually find out how they, not sure what. Obviously, if they're talking about operating revenues, they're probably talking about all of the funds that we have to budget for. Without talking to them, I really don't know how they have aggregated the data.
Yeah, someone asked me the question. We had talked about the 25% fund balance, then they see this, and it shows 50%. Or 35%, and I know we've taken things down and things change, but just, again, those are some key numbers that we look at constantly. Our MERS liability and our fund balance. And I think we need to make sure it's.
Okay.
That's all, and I can talk to you offline on that.
Yeah, we can look into that, but I really.
Shoot us an
I don't wanna
email
make
with how they
something up.
calculate that. All right, are we ready to move on? We are going to take a short break. When we return, we will take up the budget issue, followed directly by the airport presentation. So Mr. Baldwin is here to present, and you can go ahead and set up while we're on break. So we are in recess. For November 20th, 2019, coming back from recess. We are at item 10A in the agenda. This is the approval of the 2020 budget, which we had a hearing on earlier in the meeting. It's on page 131 in the packet. Is there a motion to approve the 2020 budget?
Move to approve the budget. Support.
Moved by Klaus, supported by Jewett. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Jewett,
Yes.
Hunley,
Yes?
Kofia,
Yes.
Klaus,
Yes.
Lapointe,
Yes.
Henschel.
Yes. Motion carries. We have our budget.
Thank you for all the work.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks. Really appreciate it, guys.
All right, and we have the airport presentation and airport governance ad hoc recommendation. Steve Baldwin has been the consultant the airport's been working with to look at governance models. He was in town, so I asked him to come and give the presentation he gave to the airport and go through with the steps, how we arrived where we're at and where we're at. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Baldwin. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioners, for having us. If you'll recall, I think the last time, I may be incorrect on this, but I believe the last time I appeared before you was December of 2018.
It was March of this year, weren't you here?
Oh, yes, back in March as well. Thank you. But it started with Kevin asking for, on behalf of the NRAC, to establish ad hoc committees from both counties to help us get through the strategic planning portion of the governance review for the airport. What I'd like to do today is basically go through the out report from that those ad hoc committee initiatives with the NRAC, and then take questions at the end. So we'll talk about how the committees were set up, the research and findings that came out of the exercise, and feedback that was received throughout the process. Strategic planning for airports, as I've probably presented to you in the past, is a regular activity that occurs at airports nationally. And part of that exercise is to take a look at the current governance structure of the airport and how that's performing. In this case, we got into looking at some of your existing 1972 documents with regard to the airport operating lease and agreement and the airport deed itself. So we'll talk about that a little bit. In March, there was a governance committee that was stood up by both Grand Traverse and Leelanau counties. The governance committee was made up of 3 members from each county as well as 3 members from the NRAC. And they had a very clear mandate, which was to take a look at governance in terms of should it be maintained as it is, should it be modified within the framework of the current model, should it be transitioned into an authority under Michigan Act 95, which was passed in 2015, or should something altogether differently be considered, which would require state legislative action. The committees met over a course of roughly 8 months, I think maybe 9 months we're into now. Held 7 meetings, basically nearly on a monthly basis, all meetings open to the public. And then on September 24th, the committees also held a specific, generally open meeting for the public to come in and for us all to just focus on listening to those public comments and taking them into consideration as we move forward.
Mr. Baldwin, can I ask a question about the public hearing?
Sure.
How is it advertised? How would the public have known that they were welcome to come in
Yeah.
and give input?
I believe Kevin had them all up on the airport website. Emails went out to all the members. The administration can speak to that.
Posted in our normal open meetings required criteria, but also as asked for by the various public members, we specifically invited.
We got a lot of people that watch this at home.
They're going to want to hear you.
We compete with
Thank
soap
you.
operas.
I know.
so-
I apologize for that. Kevin Klein, Airport Director. Yes, we used our standard publications through the Open Meetings Act, which is in the paper, the Record Eagle, also through on our website. We use that. We have our meeting agendas published. And then, as required or as commented by the public prior to other meetings, they asked for various governmental officials to be invited, city, county, townships, and so we also did that through email.
Thank you.
I'm glad I was able to answer that. So there was a very open, a very deliberative, structured dialogue that occurred, and many topics the committee was introduced to and dialogued on throughout this process. Part of that dialogue included reviewing the airport history, going back to 1935 and then coming all the way forward until when the NRAC was formed in 1971. Interestingly, between 1971 and to the current time, the concept of moving the airport to an authority had been broached on several occasions, but it was never really pursued. And perhaps maybe one of those reasons is because this Act 95, established in 2015, didn't exist. So it would have been a pretty monumental task to try to go to an authority, knowing that necessarily you would have to have state level legislation to support that.
Can I interrupt for a second? Why would you need? Hey.
I'm sorry.
Why this? I mean, there are numerous authorities already. Why would an airport specifically need the?
Yeah, contained in the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Carry
on. The second topic reviewed in some detail were the conditions of the joint operating agreement that exists today, as well as the existing land lease for the airport. And that provides the foundation on which the airport operates, as well as the appointment of the commission members, which are 7 total, 5 from Grand Traverse, 2 from Leelanau, and it sets the powers and limitations for the commission. It was also undertaken, the review was undertaken by the governance committee. And in that review, there were a number of deficiencies that were noted in those agreements. And those deficiencies, they weren't necessarily deficiencies in 1972 when those agreements were crafted, but 1972 was a long time ago and the world has changed. So one of the matters that was raised as a concern is there's no dispute resolution process identified in those governing documents between the two counties. They were also crafted at a time when the city of Traverse City was also part of the NRAC and then later withdrew, I believe, in about 1990. So in addition to there being no dispute resolution, reference to the property ownership and reversionary clause in those agreements is incorrectly stated now because it actually states the property would be reverted to the city if it were no longer used as an airport or for other reasons. When the city no longer maintains a property interest per se, it's the two counties. And those kinds of inconsistencies are throughout these documents as well as in the deed for the property. There's no minimum qualifications for appointing board members. Commissioner Kofia this morning mentioned how difficult it is to make appointments, and you are looking for highly qualified people for providing the policy guidance for these organizations that are subcategory organizations to the county, including the airport. So we feel that having minimum qualifications are important, as well as having both a methodology for appointing members, as well as a methodology for removing members if for some reason the board chose to exchange a seat on that board. The agreements also call for the distribution of profits from the airport to the city, and I think primarily to the city. And that is actually counter to current FAA policy with regard to what they call diversion of revenue. Public airports today that receive federal funds in order to operate and maintain themselves are prohibited from sharing profits off the airport. The FAA's basic concept on that is that the user fees for the airport should be kept as minimal as possible. And if you have surplus properties, instead of charging such higher user fees, those profits should be used to lower your rates and charges you charge the airlines. And so you're just not allowed to take those profits off. That's a condition of accepting federal funds for your airport. You actually accept millions of dollars every year, and on occasion many millions of dollars. For example, when you do a complete runway overhaul project like you've recently done at the airport in order to run that facility. It's a condition you enter into in an agreement with the federal government when you do that.
So another question from me. I'm going to be the irritating one, I'm sorry.
It's our job to ask questions.
So I hear that and I get that, and federal money comes with federal strings. So for instance, when we as a community are trying to build sidewalks, and so there's a request to build sidewalks kind of through the zone that's there on Garfield, and the airport can't participate in that because that would be diverting. They can't share in the cost of that because that would be diverting revenue, and I get that in a way, but it seems like an alternative way of looking at it, because we do seem to have some flexibility with the way that we look at aeronautical use of land. So we have the boundaries of the airport mapped out, which include, what's now the Costco facility that throws off rent that goes to the airport, and you couldn't use that rent to do anything other than support the airport. But it seems to me, under the current situation, it's the choice of the owners of that land, which is Leelanau County and Grand Traverse County, whether or not to include that as actual property of the airport, because we could have carved that out as county land, we rent it out, and then use those revenues to build the thing. We would still have to keep it under the same use, heights, and it would still be bound by whatever restrictions the FAA puts on that land that's within the flight cone, and I get that, but it didn't have to be airport property that threw off airport revenue that couldn't be used for other things. That's choices that we're making, correct?
Well, I'm not intimately familiar with the matter regarding sidewalks that you're bringing up.
But as an example.
But are the sidewalks inside or outside of the airport property?
I believe they would be within, the road cuts through what I believe is the airport property, so
Well,
I'm sure
I will try to come back to that, or ask Terry or Kevin to answer that at the end of the presentation, but I think that's a specific current today issue you have, that it's maybe not as related to the governance, but more with respect to the management of the airport regardless of the governance. So,
okay, well, the only reason it in my mind comes up, I come with a lot of humility of the stuff that I don't know, but I come with a fair degree of skepticism just because the airport is very important to the community.
Yeah.
And hey, Kevin, thank you for all that you've done for including me and bringing me in. And it's really not a question in my mind about whether the airport is well-run operation or not, because I think it clearly is.
Right.
It's that it is basically right dead in the middle of our community. I recognize that a lot of the passengers aren't from this community. They come from all around northwestern Michigan. They come here. And so as whatever our governance model is, the more that we make it its own self-standing entity, the more, it is totally within reason that the airport is going to look out for the operations of the airport. And here at this board, we're tasked with looking out for the community. Mm-hmm. And if we separate the two, and the airport wants to govern can buy and sell land. They can bond without thing. They can do all of the things that they know that they need to do to make this the best airport possible. Flint has a fantastic airport, but the city isn't doing well. And I'm not saying that they're correlated. I'm just saying that it's a part of our community, and I want to make sure as we go forward that it stays a partner in what we do.
Yeah, so I believe it's in the airport's best interest, and I know your airport very well, and I've gotten to know your administration very well, that if they could figure out a way to be cooperative and do these types of projects within FAA policy, they would. But the FAA policy with regard to diversion of revenue today, which was implemented, I think, don't hold me to this, but roughly around 1990. So not in 1972. Regardless of that governance model, that policy doesn't change. So whether it's a commission or it's an authority, the concept of taking revenue off the airport for some alternative use than providing for airport infrastructure is the same policy. It's the creativeness that your administration can apply to try to help you in other regards is a good thing, and I'm sure they want to be a good neighbor. So.
Okay. Thanks. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay.
I shouldn't apologize, but it's me.
So there are some other inconsistencies in the agreement with regard to zoning, and that's with regard to current zoning law. And the deed itself contains matters that are inconsistent with FAA policy, particularly with respect to fair market value regarding the issuance of easements and other considerations on the airport. So the governance of airports in Michigan is well established in Michigan law. There's several different statutes on the book that allow, that provide some guidelines and provide a statutory framework for managing airports. And in 2015, and we were directly involved with this transaction precipitated by Kent County, was the creation of Act 95. So Kent County, they wanted to move to an independent airport authority. They felt the airport was extremely vital to the community. They didn't want it to ever become politicized or be anything other than the best airport it could be, and they pursued the creation of this act. When we went up to the legislature to advocate for that, the legislature was very clear, and they said, if you're going to create an act that allows municipalities to opt into an authority format, give us something that will work for every airport in Michigan if they so choose to do that. Don't make it a one-up piece of legislation. So back in my previous slide about the options that the committee were asked to look at, one of which was a separate piece of legislation supporting an individual need for this airport, would be pretty difficult to achieve now after the legislature has given that direction not to bring them a one-up piece of legislation. There's 17 commercial service airports in the state of Michigan, and it's difficult to see, but the top 3 airports by employment are already moved to an authority, then followed by Cherry Capital Airport, and then back to an authority. But the trend here is, and the trend nationally is, as airports grow and their employments grow, their operations become more complicated. You have more airlines, you have a greater number of flights, you have bigger requirements for security and firefighting, you have greater parking demands, you have non-aviation revenue goals to achieve, to try to keep rates and charges at the airport low, which drives lower airfares. And so as this complexity comes into the formula, the airports have found in order to efficiently manage themselves, they've got to get to this point where they're a little more autonomous than reporting through, what, I don't mean this in a negative way, a bureaucratic government structure. That doesn't mean that you give up public accountability. The law is very strong with regard to public accountability, open meetings law, audit requirements, audit committee requirements. So it gives you some greater flexibility to how you manage your facility and does not compromise public accountability in any way. In fact, it strengthens it from what you have today.
With giving the airport the ability to do its own zoning, you don't believe that's a loss in a public accountability at all?
I don't believe that's a loss in accountability.
Why not?
The airport really has limited property that it can manage today, right? It's got the airport airfield itself, and it has a couple of parcels that it can allow to develop for creating this non-aviation revenue to offset aviation operating costs.
Like Costco.
Like Costco. And in my opinion, the Costco thing is really a necessary revenue generator for the airport, because without it as a community, the airfares would be even higher than they are today. And I don't think that's good for the community.
What percentage of the community, Grand Traverse County residents, use the airport as opposed to people from the surrounding? I'm not arguing that the airport is not an important partner and an asset to this community, but it is a fraction of our total population who actually fly in and out regularly. Whereas, for example, my district, I can hear the airport and I live 1.5 miles away. There's a direct impact, and zoning in particular has an impact on the quality of life of the residences, the residential neighborhoods directly around the airport. And when the zoning goes in-house, and let's say the community says, we feel like another Costco, or what, please let me finish. We think that another Costco or some other large commercial enterprise like that is directly going to impact the community's quality of life. When the zoning is in-house and the airport gets to do its own zoning, what is the public's recourse?
You look at the zoning, I believe the statutes that are established in Michigan establish the zoning law. We're not asking to change the zoning law in any form.
You're asking to do your own zoning instead of having.
We're not
it done
asking to change the zoning law. The Michigan Aeronautics Act already addresses zoning. If it's on airport property, it's exempt from local zoning.
Wasn't Costco subject to some of the zoning restrictions?
Is
that correct? Is that correct that Costco was subject to zoning laws? Our zoning laws, not the airport zoning laws. This is important. This is important to my constituents, and I'm trying to do my job, particularly because I'm not on the ad hoc that is actually having these conversations.
Absolutely, and I'll be happy to address that. The aeronautical uses first are controlled by the Aeronautics Code. We had that discussion back in July, and we walked through all that, so I won't get into that. So that zoning is as outlined. So noise issues, anything of those issues are already at the airport and controlled. The reason the zoning for Costco and everything was bought back through the city processes is because in the agreement, that was an agreement between the two counties under the legislative or the lease and operating agreement for the airport commission. So there was a zoning requirement. So it was brought through under that premise. So today, under the authority model, what we would have to follow is the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, which is the same act that the surrounding townships, city, everybody else would have to follow. So there would be, review of any project similar to what a city planning commission does, what a township planning group would do. Those activities would take the same place in the same public forum.
Kevin.
But they would be airport zoning authority, not city or other. There would be no other governmental entity enforcing zoning, and that's the part that I'm trying to get clear on. I think it's pretty important.
If a city resident has a concern about zoning, they would currently go to the city zoning board. But the houses closest and most affected to the airport are in East Bay Township. So would East Bay Township residents currently have to go to the city zoning board if they had concern, or Garfield Township where there's businesses nearby under Garfield Township zoning?
Well,
it would seem like this would be, you'd have a central place to go if you had an issue with the
Let
zoning.
me weigh in from a Grand Traverse County Commission perspective. You have no zoning control. The county has no zoning control.
Of course.
Under
I'm aware.
Under an authority, this board will make the appointments to the authority board. You will have greater leverage over how that authority board responds to these matters than you have today.
Is it part of the discussion of going to an authority actually spreading out the number of members over an 8 or 10 county area necessarily?
That has not become, that we're not into that part of the conversation yet, because this was simply those four choices. What should the model be? The next part of the conversation is what would be the details within that model. So yes, the number of seats, the appointments, how they're achieved, next steps.
Well, I believe that it would be premature to say that our county would have more leverage when we don't know how many seats. Currently, we have 5 out of 7, and it could get spread out to maybe 1 or 2 per county, even though the airport rests within our county.
Well,
I'm going to, the zoning thing is really important to me, and again, yes, some are in East Bay, but a lot of them are in my district in the city, and so this is going to be important to me, and this is the place where I actually get to ask these questions. I tried attending the ad hocs and I wasn't allowed. I was only able to give public comment at the end, so I'm doing my job here. Please continue.
I appreciate that, and everything you're saying is we're taking it all into consideration, and we're working with, 2 counties and an airport board, and coalescing this thing. And I'm somewhat confident that if it's allowed to go further, it will come out to be a pretty good model for you all, and your questions will be answered.
Thank you.
There are a number of different models nationally. This is also, I'm sorry, on your screen, it's a little difficult to read. But the models range from everywhere from, obviously, a full authority, a multimodal authority, county, city, districts, military. There's a couple privates out there, as well as even educational institutions. When we look at the models in terms of how they fit within an overall aspect nationally, and again, these are only the commercial service airports, combining the multimodal airport authorities with the regular airport authorities, about 37% of the airports today are operated by authorities, currently 15% by a county structure. Over the last 20 years, the trend has been clearly moving towards airport authorities. Airports like Asheville, North Carolina, Syracuse, New York, obviously Kent County, Grand Rapids here in Michigan, they have all moved to an authority. And the transactions over the last 20 years are predominantly all authorities. There's a couple that are set up as sort of trust models that in those particular states or jurisdictions allow those trust models better access to capital and financing a project. So they may have established a model that's more specific to a local state need and within the structure of that particular state's statutes. The committee went through looking at the advantages and the disadvantages, and they did it from a number of perspectives. They looked at it from an airport perspective, they looked at it from an authority perspective, they looked at it from a commission perspective. And here they've outlined commission perspective, airport perspective, commission advantages, commission disadvantages. I won't read through the entire list, but I'll tell you that this list of disadvantages becomes less and less as you move more towards the authority model. In this slide, they went through the advantages, disadvantages from an authority perspective as opposed to an airport perspective. And here, there were a number of authority perspectives, some of which are the limitation of political influence on the airport, a greater flexibility and more nimbleness to interact with business, because when you think about it, an airport, although it's a public entity, every tenant in that airport is a private sector tenant. Every airline, every rental car, every food and beverage operator. So an airport, has to figure out how to interact and move very nimbly with business as it manages itself. And this boiled down to identifying several advantages of an authority. And again, this is with full committee involvement in this dialogue. Singular airport enterprise focus. This board has to worry about your budget, parks and recreation, seniors. The Airport Authority Board has a singular focus, what's best for the airport and what's best for the community's airport. And they focus on that, and they don't have to worry about anything else. Enhances decision-making by doing that. The board would be focused on lowering operating costs. You remove a layer of bureaucracy, quite honestly. Kevin's time here would be spent trying to lure in better airlines, more service.
I know we're annoying.
It strengthens regional coordination and economic development, particularly since Act 95 requires that at least one member, and it could be more, but at least one member of the authority board be appointed from outside the two counties. So it has this bringing in a regional aspect. And when we talked to stakeholders and invited stakeholders into the conversation, that was very important to stakeholders because they view this airport now to be the region's airport. They don't view it to be any particular county's airport or the city's airport. They look at Northern Michigan region as being a much larger region. Allegiant Airlines, which just started service at the airport, is bringing passengers in from all over this region. There are obviously people that follow the $69 airfare, but it really is a regional airport. It allows for better air service development. That's the process of talking to the airlines, presenting to them regional statistics and demographics in order to get them interested in bringing in more and better service. Facilitates coordination with local governments and community bodies on a broad basis. And one of the reasons we say that, and why we also say that it helps with regard to depoliticizing the airport, is all airport business is conducted at a singular table. If you have an airport issue, you come to the airport board meeting. Your voice is heard singularly. The entire board that has policy oversight of that airport has to listen to you and has to take your comments into consideration. It's not disparate between one county, another county, or a city. That's a positive. So the committee did identify a number of advantages.
Can I ask you a question there real quick on your
Yes, sir.
benefits? Can you give us some examples how it actually lowers operating cost?
Yes. Obviously, there's less administrative overhead. The airport is able to control its headcount, shared services with the counties, legal expenses, those types of things, is able to better manage them directly than indirectly. So, for example, today, the airport could call on the counties to share legal services expenses. It hasn't been doing that. It's been taking that off of its books. But it's the county's airports, the two counties' airport, right? So it could be calling for the sharing of those services. So in those areas, by bringing in those policies and procedures where it's wholly contained, it will save money.
And I have a follow-up. You were talking about public accountability and that folks would have the ability to come in and the airport authority would have to listen to the public because they can come in and make public comment. Is that essentially?
Yes. And
so the difference that I think, this board, for example, has gotten a lot of public comment in our first 10 months, but we're elected. So what we do with that public comment, the public then has decisions they can make about how they feel their comment was received.
Agreed.
The authority board members, as I understand it, would not be elected. Is that correct?
No. Well, the appointments to the board seats themselves would be appointed by the two counties.
So if the constituents
But the two counties do have the privilege to appoint elected
Yes.
officials.
So if the constituents who went to the airport authority, to give public comment on any number of topics, including, for example, how things are being zoned, and they were not satisfied with how they were received and what was done about it, their recourse would not be to remove the authority members. What would their recourse be?
Same as it is today.
Excuse me?
Same as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
We can't remove airport commissioners. It has to be an act of the governor.
We appoint them, though.
Right.
Yeah, but you appoint them for a term. You have no removal process.
Mhm.
Whether
And
we-
you actually don't have an appointment guideline.
And I guess my thought here is that that's another caution that I have about moving additional power to the airport to be a self-contained and autonomous body that makes its own decisions.
Well, I will just...
So it is moving more power over without
It's the same power it has now.
No,
though.
well,
It's
no,
more power.
I think what Betsy, Commissioner Kavia is saying is that, you're right. Currently, the two county boards appoint
Yep.
the board, the airport board, but that airport board has somewhat more limited authority than what we would be giving them as we move to an authority. So we would still be appointing them in the same way and not being able to remove them. It's just now they would have on the thing that you sent out, Table 6, authority, advantages and disadvantages, county's perspective. The number 2 item is a authority disadvantage from our perspective is eminent domain. So we would be giving them, the airport, the authority to, hey, we need to do this. It's in the public interest. What is in the airport's interest is in the public's interest, and we can take that land. And now they can't do that right now. So the appointment process doesn't change, but what they can do with those powers change. I guess that's my
additional
concern.
power.
I'm jumping ahead here, Steve, but I want to point out that moving forward, we're either going to have a new airport commission with new rules that we agree with Leelanau, or it'll be a new airport authority with rules that we agree with Leelanau. Going forward, I've said from the get-go, I want increased accountability in those rules, and that's something we have the opportunity to do whether we go with a commission or an authority.
Okay.
So we can have a method where a commission could overrule a vote on eminent domain, or recall a commissioner or a number of commissioners, airport commissioners. That's all on the table.
Okay.
So what we're looking at right now is really the shell, and we're talking about the egg.
All right. All appreciated. Things can fly through, and then it happened,
No
and I
pun
didn't
intended.
realize. Yeah, sorry. But so
No,
so.
Listen, I appreciate your angst. Commissioner Henschel is right. Like, the next step would be to look into details and what powers and authority you would give to the authority, right? So.
And Leelanau County, you just presented to them and they've already made a vote.
No, that was on the house that the airport bought for the runway zone.
Yeah, oh, okay.
But you're presenting to Leelanau County around the same time as us, and we're going to be expected to deliberate as a full body over
The next steps are in our presentation.
I'm sorry?
The next steps will be talked about.
Perfect. Keep going.
Are there any other questions?
Probably. This is the place we get to ask them, so yes.
Boy,
I'm sure there will
I'm
be.
always available offline too, so everything doesn't have to stay pent up for this meeting. But to get back to the presentation, the stakeholders involved here, basically the airport commission members, the ad hoc committee members, and also taking into account public comment received throughout this process. But the stake members themselves participated in a values-based survey, basically saying, look, what's important to you with regard to the airport and with regard to the community in the airport. So that was part of the input process. There were 7 committee meetings spanning a 7 or 8 months time frame, a separate meeting with regard to simply receiving public input. There was an NRAC study session before it forwarded the report that you've received as correspondence. The NRAC board meeting. Each time that a resolution or a vote was taken through this process, every one of those resolutions or votes were passed unanimously, both by the committees and by the NRAC. So the report that you received today has been very much supported by these committees you appointed to look at this matter. And then the business leaders and community advocates came out and they were very, very much in favor. Obviously, they see the airport as being critical to the region and critical to their businesses, and are very much in favor in establishing a structure at the airport that is very nimble and is very responsive to business needs. These were the key concerns that came out of the survey process. Reduce liability for the counties. Currently, the 2 counties are liable under the commission format. If there's obviously the commission is the first line of defense, but that is your county's commission, so you carry the liability of the airport. Public transparency and accountability, obviously Act 95 builds in very strong requirements with regard to audit, public transparency, public and open meetings law, including even on this matter, a statutory requirement for public hearing. It's actually an improvement over what you have today, but on top of that, an authority can establish even additional policies that it may wish to establish with regard to transparency. Greater regional perspective we discussed, greater business focus we discussed. Act 95 provides a very, in some regards you could say it's limited, I'll say it's somewhat streamlined. It provides a very clear statutory framework for how to operate an airport and what an authority can do in that operation. You don't have that today. So it takes a lot of, there's some burning questions in the old documents, right? Like there's unanswered questions and you're never going to get to those answers going back to 1972. Act 95 takes care of that. Safety mechanisms to protect the airport as an airport for the community in the future. Promotion of the airport as regional economic asset and excellent service to the community. These were the outtakes from that survey initiative. So as people went through this dialogue, these were the things in their minds. We've presented a final report. We developed that final report with the input of the committees. We took our direction from the committees. We specifically met with them and asked them, what do you want to do? We were provided clear instruction to outport a recommendation to move to an authority. That was further supported by resolutions by the committees to forward that report to you all. And so you have it today. So next steps, if you're so inclined, are now to bury into the details of the authority. So there's 3 controlling documents, if you will, that will provide the guidelines for the authority going forward. It's the Articles of Incorporation that would establish the powers of the authority and how the authority would be structured. There is a decision that needs to be made with regard to the land of the airport itself. Should it be owned by the authority, which would be a fee simple transfer to the authority, or should it remain ownership of the counties and be leased to the authority? That's not going to result in a document, but that's a decision that has to be made in this process. And then the third is more of a legal instrument that's required as you approach the FAA for this transition. Is called an assignment and assumption agreement. So basically, if you stand up an authority, you have to assign all of the current assets and liabilities of the commission. They have to be assigned to the authority, and the authority has to agree to accept that assignment. So that is called an assignment and an assumption agreement. A few-page document, legal instrument. So the committees recommended, and even last night, your subcommittee, ad hoc committee, at its last meeting yesterday afternoon, suggested that the 2 county administrators, their support staff, come together and dialogue on this and what it will look like, to hold 1 additional general public information session and allow additional public input during the dialogue, and then come back to the counties with a proposal that gets into the specifics that you're asking about. Number of seats, number of board members, wherever they come from, what will the powers be? So that's next steps. And now, oh, do you have any questions?
I have a question, and it's probably for you, Dean. If the county was to transfer the property, the airport property over, give it away to the authority, does that affect the county assets as it relates to our bond rating? Have we lost an asset that?
I would say no. We're not reporting the airport property, the real estate, in our audited financial statements, and our bond raters have never asked questions about the airport. They issue separate financial statements. So, no.
Good, thank you.
Of the over 60 attendees for public hearing, what was kind of the consensus of the?
It was the usual community group that has come out and has been heard many times with regard to their concerns, which is about transparency and being heard. But also the business community came out. In fact, at that particular meeting, I believe we had properties represented from United Airlines there. We had 2 tenants from the FBOs there. We had, I believe, somebody from the Chamber of Commerce come in the business community. And they weren't individually invited to come. They came. and they all provided positive support. I think Kevin
I'll
wanted
just-
to make a point Kevin had asked us to note there were 60 people. He wanted to make a point that, and leading to your question earlier, has this been well broadcast and have people had a chance to know about it and come out and talk about it? And so that was one.
I'll just make a comment. I was in that meeting. I've got the list of the attendees. I was curious myself. And it was, like he said, a broad brush of people from the tourist industry, from the chamber, from Traverse Connect, business people, people who are in other cities where they have airports with authority formed for the airport. And it was the comment that I heard over and over again, that they all made their different pleas with us, saying it's a regional asset. And we have to look beyond just Traverse City and Grand Traverse County. And they felt, those who are familiar with an authority, is that it allows them to be more nimble, to respond quicker to issues that come before them in terms of dealing with airlines or what other parties they deal with. So again, I think the word nimble was something that was used by a number of the folks in support of an authority.
The other, I guess, authority airports, are they located as centrally, or are they, I mean, it's easy to talk about us as a regional airport, which is obviously true, a regional asset, but it's in our community, and what happens there doesn't affect what happens to the land use and the direct policies that you make. The people in Antrim County benefit from, right? If they get lower costs, yay. They don't have to deal with any of the other residual thing, any of the downside, in other words, if anything is harmful to the area around it. And so what I keep coming back to, and what I've heard through all of this, is that it's very positive for the business of, and I want to hear that you guys want to be a part of the community, not just the business.
I would agree with that, and I feel that there's a balance here, right?
Yeah.
There's a balance here because it is a regional asset. You do a great job running a top-notch
Heck
airport, and we're proud of it, right? The business community is supportive, and that makes perfect sense to me. The nimbleness, all that makes sense. And I believe we, as elected officials who are up here to represent the constituents, whether or not they own a business, the people who are going to be most directly impacted by changes to the landscape, right? Eminent domain, trees that go away, increased noise levels, expansion, and their quality of life. I wonder how many business owners have their homes right next to the airport, right? So there's just a balance to be struck here, and I believe it is incumbent on us as elected officials to make sure that we are considering the constituents who may or may not be able to afford airfare to go wherever or own a business, right? So that is our job too. And I hope you can appreciate that's where some of the passion is coming from, because those voices are very important as well.
And I appreciate that, and that, I think, going through all the public discussion came very evident and forthcoming, and to kind of look at the issue of the asset itself from a regional standpoint and from a local standpoint. The biggest, I think the most important thing that was identified through that process is, as a regional asset, you're 100% right. Charlevoix, Antrim, Otsego, Sault Ste. Marie, they don't have a stake in it.
Right.
So the investment then becomes more important to be specifically focused, because if the asset fails right now, the burdensome becomes all of Grand Traverse and Leelanau County. But if there's an authority, there's a protection of that burden of that asset. So in this particular case, from a financial statement or a financial side of it, the authority then could go through a bankruptcy, reverts back to the two counties. So it's protected. There's an additional layer of protection for that asset that comes through having an authority model. So I think going towards that type of governance actually offers more protections for our local citizens. And then the issues of direct things like you're talking about eminent domain, those are all addressed in the Articles of Incorporation. And various forms can take place, and I think they'll be discussed. But when you look at the base of what the Airport Commission does now and the authority it has now, you're really carrying that type of same authority. It's just a different model. And then some of the other questions that were brought forth really come back to specifically to FAA regulations. I know you brought up Costco and the land, and couldn't the county carve that out? And the answer to that question is very specific. No, it could not do that. The reason it couldn't do that is because the property was originally purchased with federal grant dollars. So all the federal requirements for all the property, specifically that Costco area, that area used to be a runway protection zone for one of the runways, would have to fall back to those federal granted criteria. When the airport asked to go to non-aeronautical use of that area, the FAA made it very clear in the directive to the airport that we could only do leasing for the operation and benefit of the airport. If we asked for it to be completely released, to be sold, or to have the counties operate it to collect the revenue, the answer from the FAA would have been no. So the answer, I wanted to get back to that question, is we would not have been allowed to carve that out to allow it to come to the county.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Okay. So from the outside looking in, just a everyday person driving down the road or getting the services of the airport by flying out there, at the end of the day, we would not see any differences in the airport, the services provided. I mean, this is just all the backside of things.
You wouldn't see any negative differences. You may see some increases in air service or frequency of flight destinations. I mean, that'll be a goal of the authority. And one thing I would expect the authority would take the strategic planning process to heart, which will identify 3 or 4 or 5 primary goals that it should be focusing on. And, to be reinvigorated and focus on that. You'll probably see some improvement, but cosmetically, you're not going to see any changes to the airport. Other than the usual things. I know Kevin's trying to improve some parking out there and stuff like that, but, you have a lovely airport. It's always going to be a lovely airport. So.
I was just at an airport this week out west there, and it's about the size of this room.
Oh, yeah, what was it?
I said I was just at an airport this week out west picking my boy up, and the airport itself was about the size of this room.
Which airport?
Kearney, Nebraska.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working with, going through a similar exercise right now with a fairly small airport, Lynchburg, Virginia. Very nice, very quaint airport. So there's a number of them out there.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Steve, are you, I don't know, are you hired by the airport or are you hired by the county? Or are you here representing?
Well, right now, the airport and the counties are one and the same.
I guess, okay, yeah, no, fair enough, yeah. But
so,
I mean,
but
yeah.
yes, the procurement was through Kevin's group.
Okay.
And again, was to take a look at the strategic planning process of the airport, and then governance is part of that.
Okay, thank you.
So next steps you have listed here, NRAC unanimously recommends and submits to the AGAC Airport Governance Ad Hoc Committee report to Grand Traverse and Leelanau County and request the counties form an ad hoc committee, and 2, right? 1 for Leelanau, 1 for us, for the purposes of exploring the research presented within the AGAC report and recommendation and NRAC resolution.
Yeah.
And then designate staff. I've gone on the record at least 3 times at these meetings that I would have liked to have been on the governance. I'd probably be less hard on y'all right now if I had had the opportunity to be at the table sooner.
If I may, there was a meeting yesterday afternoon after our slides were sent in, and the ad hoc committee from your board modified that suggestion a little bit. They're suggesting that the county administrators, and it's up here, so there was a slide change. I'm sorry you didn't get that. But it's very similar. It's just saying, look, you've got to get these 2 county administrators to come down together and work collectively with the administrative and technical staff to drop something that you can look at.
So there's, since what I got last night and this morning, there is no longer a recommendation for an ad hoc
Well, this
of
is
county
this is not what
commissioners.
you have to do. This is what the committee recommended.
Yeah,
yesterday.
we already had the ad hoc. We appointed it in March.
Yeah.
I'm aware.
The ad hoc, the minutes were emailed last night right after the meeting, because we knew Steve was in town. We wanted to get all the information. Don't expect you to make a decision today. We still have, a lot to work through. But, so, the ad hoc, the airport ad hoc, which was Commissioner LaPointe, myself, and Administrator Alger, met last night after the airport meeting. The airport board, as expected, recommended this forward, so we met so we could get it on our table and fulfill our duty as the ad hoc committee. And that was to, it was moved and passed to affirm the airport recommendation to Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners. So our internal, the Grand Traverse County side ad hoc, is recommending we move to a governance model that is an authority. That's the framework. And then whether we become a commission, a new commission as an airport, or an authority, we need to hash out what our concerns are, what we want in that agreement, and we need to find something that we both counties agree on. And so the other motion which was emailed to you was that we recommend directing staff to explore articles of incorporation with Leelanau and report to this Board of Commissioners with what you feel would be mutually acceptable, incorporating in the process a public input session to be held at a December Board of Commissioners meeting. So that's what we are recommending we do, is for commissioners, if you have individual concerns, to work with staff to make sure those are addressed. And if they're not, bring it back to our board meeting when we look at what they come up with. Okay?
We had already voted at our meeting, was it in October, to direct the administrator. He has been collecting questions and he asked for them by, I believe, December 6th from this body to dig into the specifics of our current legal arrangement with the airport property. So that was a vote that this board already took to do that research. So this is an additional.
Yeah, so it's kind of already underway.
Right, and that is, you're expecting to come back in December rather than giving the administrator till January to get the answers to this board's questions on just that underlying arrangement of our legal rights and responsibilities on that property. So that you're asking for a vote on this in December before the administrator can come back with the answers in January of next year as we directed him.
A vote on whether to become an authority? No, I didn't expect that till
if I may, I think
it would be helpful to get clarity on this timeline.
I think if I may, what Commissioner Henschel is suggesting is the two county administrators come together and try to find commonality in what a future structure would look like. But in the process of doing that, to hold a general public comment input meeting, and the meeting is in December, you probably wouldn't see the administrator's work completed after that meeting, and probably not before January, February, or even March. And then that's only coming back to you saying, look, we've rolled our shirt sleeves up and we've looked at this, and if we were to go forward, this is what we would recommend it should look like. That still remains at that point your all's decision, both counties' decision, whether you want to go with that. I would just also add, I know that you've been passionate about this, and I know that one of my staff members, Penny Perkins, reached out and tried to, she did collect your input, but I'm always available too. So you can always contact me as we go through this, and I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability. And then Kevin, I know, is also very, very helpful with that. So.
All right, so then in the interest moving forward, I will move that this board direct staff to explore articles of incorporation with Leelanau and report to this board with what you feel would be mutually acceptable, incorporating in the process a public input session to be held at a December Board of Commissioners meeting.
Can you email that to me?
Yep, will do.
Was this resolution in our packet?
It was emailed
Last night.
from the minutes last night. We'll have them go out to everybody as well. All right, so moved by Henschel, supported by Jewett. discussion.
Have any of the public sessions been after business hours?
Meetings are
Generally,
usually at
no.
noon, right?
I don't think so.
Noon
So-
on a weekday is when you've been meeting?
Tuesdays at noon, yeah.
Yeah. So no.
Yeah.
So I always go back to the County Road Commission. They've been dealing with thorny issues and I've been continually impressed. And among those have been some sessions that were after hours, got lots of public input, and they truly actively on their Facebook page and in a number of other ways got the word out and they got people there. And I think this is probably raised just to
You
that
know,
level.
in this December outreach, we could do an afternoon session, take a break, and do an evening session. I mean, you could figure the mechanics of that out if that's helpful.
The one I attended for the east-west corridor, which is a very hot-button issue in this region, they had several. I went to one where they went off-site. They went to, I want to say it was East Middle School.
Right.
They had everything that they were proposing set up, the detail. They had staff members at every station where you could ask questions and give direct input. It was a far cry better than showing up to one of these meetings and getting your 3 minutes and then you don't know
yeah.
the
So-
answer to any of your questions. So I think there's
So-
opportunity for us to think about that so that we are able to really engage community members who can't come to a noon Tuesday meeting.
So we can work with the mechanics of that to figure out how everybody can have an opportunity. But remember this, we're asking for input prior to the two county administrators finalizing their drafts. So they're going to be saying, look, these are the topics that we're looking for input on. I believe this will be a dialogue, not just somebody coming and saying you got 3 minutes. It'll be a dialogue. That input will be received and recorded, and all of that input will be taken into consideration. And what the committee suggested last night, or yesterday afternoon, was as those comments are incorporated into the work, then they be noted that the comment was incorporated in work. If the comment's inappropriate to be incorporated, then that's noted. So there will be a record for every comment received. The other part of this to keep in mind is this is setting up what it might look like for your further consideration. And then after that, if you decide under the Act 95, your next step is to actually file a formal intent to form an authority. That too has a public hearing requirement. So that also, after the administrators have frameworked this and you're all on board with it, then that's the session where you put the easels up and you say, this is what it's going to look like. And you do a presentation, you do a public hearing, you take comments. That's sort of the last shot. And then you make a decision whether you go forward and file that intent. So you're months away from that.
Okay. As a committee member, was sat in on all the governance discussions. I just want to share my perspective. I agree, and I don't think anybody's disputing the fact that we need to make a change with our airport governance model because it's kind of an end of life. If we do nothing, it's going to limp along and things just get more and more difficult and expensive. So whether we build a new commission or we build a new authority, we need to do something because we're outdated. We have a lot of areas and deficiencies that have been identified that need to be addressed. And when we address those in either way, it is my intention to request a more control. The biggest concern I've heard, and I just talked to the mayor, was here at break, and the people, what he's hearing is, we're going to lose control if we go to an authority. And I think that's largely stems because people think of an authority as this sovereign nation within your community that can do whatever it wants. In Act 95, if you read the act, and it's been provided to all commissioners, it's a very narrowly defined authority. It's not a traditional authority that does whatever it wants, levies taxes. Act 95 authority cannot levy taxes. As far as eminent domain, we can limit what it can do in the Articles of Incorporation. So we have an opportunity here, whichever direction we go, to number one, increase accountability of appointed officials on the airport board and establish avenues to take care of disagreements between the counties. If there's something that's going on that we want to overrule, we can put in the Articles of Incorporation that with a 2/3 vote we could overrule an action of that board. And that can happen under either situation. We can also establish an avenue to remove commissioners from it. Currently, we don't have that. As I mentioned, currently, if somebody had gross misconduct and just they were a horrible person in the community, we would have to petition the governor to remove them from office. So in either route, I'd like to see that. The reason I like the authority model is it's a cheaper transition, and I can't explain that exhaustively, but looking at all the deficiencies with the current agreement, it's kind of like the difference between fixing your old car that has a laundry list of problems and replacing it with a new car that has no problems. So, and I don't know how accurate that illusion is, but that's kind of my perception of it. I do like the idea of centralized zoning. If someone, I mean, under current issues for non-aeronautical uses, city zoning applies. But if you live in East Bay Township, you got to come to a city commission to petition for relief. Or if you live in Garfield Township, you got to go to the city to petition for relief. Where if we move this zoning centralized, you've got one place to go to for any issues with the airport. And the concern with zoning, we lose control. Well, right now the city has control, not the county.
Well, we would be removing that control by going
We'd
this
be
way.
moving
And that's
it
important to my
yeah.
district.
Yep, yeah, so it would be moved from the city in non-aeronautical purposes. Right now, aeronautical purposes fall under federal law, and therefore it's not in our hands anyways. And the third thing is the liability piece. It's one more layer to insulate this body from anything that may happen at the airport. So that's why I lean towards the authority model, and I'll let the other committee members say their piece as well.
The only thing I'll add to that is again, I think to understand what the authority, what powers they have, it'll be in looking at the Articles of Incorporation. And Commissioner Henschel mentioned about we can retain control. I just want to make sure we're judicious in that. You can get to a point where we're going to hamstring them. If everyone adds in, I want this control and 2/3 vote, you have to come back to the committee for, I mean, it'll be, so I'm just saying, before we start putting up, here's all the controls, we don't want to micromanage something that is very technical and very, we know very little about, and has a lot of governance from the FAA anyway. So I would hope to see that the controls we put in are very few in that regard and very, very precise. And then we don't have them running back to our board and up to Leelanau on everything that comes before them. So just be cautious in that regard.
Commissioner Alger, you have anything to add as a committee member? I'm sorry, Administrator Alger.
Only that we have to revisit the agreement. I'm going to go back to the fact that the agreement is broken. There are pieces of our current agreement that are in contradiction to law, so we have to go through this process anyway. The authority agreement, from my perspective and the discussions we've had, we have 50% of the ownership and 85% of the liability to the airport, and that should be corrected, certainly. And in 26, 27 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bott, we have not provided funding to the airport, nor have we received any revenue from the airport. I do think we need to go through a very good process, and the public input session ahead of the administrators going into the discussion of the bylaws will give us an idea of concerns. We've already heard many of them, but we should have a listing of concerns that Mr. Janik and I can walk through and either incorporate them with notation or not incorporate them with notation and provide people answers as to why we either can or cannot incorporate the recommended language to the articles. So I'm encouraged to go through the process and work with Mr. Janik on it.
Go ahead.
So your motion is the recommendation of the ad hoc committee?
Yeah, it's what was emailed, which is directing staff to explore articles of incorporation with Leelanau and report back to this board with what you feel would be mutually acceptable, incorporating in the process a public input session to be held in December at a Grand Traverse County Board of Commission meeting.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say that's the only public input we're going to take. I mean, we may choose to have a study session or a, an EASL session, if you will, kind of a less formal session. But this is just what we came up with as a committee to keep the ball rolling and move ahead.
I just want to make sure, yeah, that was the committee recommendation.
Yep. Commissioner Kafia?
And so I appreciate that in this PowerPoint presentation, the pros and cons were presented from the perspective of the airport, right? And I think that's an important piece. And I'm wondering whether when Jet Janik and Nate get together to look at this, if something that they could come back with is pros and cons from the perspective of us as the county government, right, for the county taxpayers, whether or not they live near the airport, fly, what have you, the pros and cons from our perspective. I think I understand why the airport sees this as a very advantageous move, and I can appreciate a lot of the logic to it, but I have yet to see, just from a public good perspective, the pros and cons. And so, Mr. Henschel, is that something you're willing, as a friendly amendment, to add, that the administrators come back with clear pros and cons presentation?
I think that, hold on, since we just got this and I was trying to,
yeah,
it's 27-page thing. There is actually a table that kind of speaks to the pros and cons from the county's perspective.
That is correct.
On page 19.
Of
So
the
it's
email we got last night.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Which I'm like, and
Which I'm
so
still trying to even read.
obviously we need time to read this and everything.
So is the answer that that's already been done, and I just need to read the email that I got late last night?
So the committees did take a look at the pros and cons from 3 different perspectives. They looked at it from a county perspective, they looked at it from a commission perspective, and they looked at it from an authority perspective. And each of those perspectives paired with the community's perspective. That is in the report. And with regard to that concern, Commissioner Kofia, I don't see why that dialogue can't be part of this conversation as we go forward. I'm not sure how you deal with that as an amendment. I don't know that that's truly necessary, but I'd invite you to review that, and if we've missed something, bring it to our attention so that we can include it in the dialogue.
If I can get clear, I got 2 different emails last night, one from Spencer Gillett, who I believe works for your firm,
Yes.
and the other from the chairman. Which of these 2 emails that I still need to finish reading, because there were documents that were 20-plus
There
pages
should be
long,
this-
do I read that?
My email had 2 documents.
So it's
His
yours.
had the one, and the one is one of the ones in my email, so.
So your email
So
contained
it's a
both.
duplicate. His
Yeah.
email is a duplicate of what I had sent.
And the
I just
AGAC.
sent a letter from the airport board, which is included.
May I answer Commissioner Coffey's question? This board directed me to do essentially what you're asking me to do and report back in January. Since then, I have asked commissioners to give questions, and one of the questions was, what are the pros and cons? So it is my intention to, well, now I would like to maybe get clarity on the direction, do I answer in January or March? But I would like to engage that question from not only administration's perspective, but the board's perspective as well. Mr. Baldwin is correct. We did talk about the benefits of each from different perspectives, but I would like to answer the question as best I can, specific to what our current agreement says. And because the question was posed in a little different way, but I would like to present that to this board eventually. But I would like clarity as to the 2 guidances. We were supposed to go through this process by January. You let me
I
continue that?
definitely say both. I mean, just give us an update in January as to where we're at, and then.
But we want them to present something in December
Well,
also.
the December discussion was
That's a public input.
As a public input session only, and I like what you just said, Steve, about having 2. I'm perfectly okay with that. Is
As long
that,
as there's
is that
food.
something that the board would want to have as a commission meeting, or we can discuss that and work through that?
Certainly, I'm all for, having more meetings. I love meetings.
Well, it doesn't have to be necessarily a Board of Commissioner meeting. It can be a public input session that can be run by Mr. Janik and I, or
Right.
just staff, that the commissioners could attend.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing here to say you can't do more. right? I mean, what we have on the table is you have to at least do this. All right, so I'm fine with making a friendly amendment that their report back shall include a list of pros and cons from county perspectives.
Thank you.
Is that all right with you? All right. All right, any further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to move forward, directing staff to communicate with Leelanau, get back with something that's mutually acceptable, and incorporate a at least one public input session in December.
What's the target date to have that completed? You go through the various study sessions or hearings, whatever you want to call them, input sessions, and then have something presented that's both Leelanau staff and Grand Traverse staff think is the framework that covers the Articles of Incorporation.
We talked about March-ish.
I'd say February, March.
I think we need a kind of a hard date, or target, I should say, that, because I hear a lot of things, we're going to have these sessions and multiple sessions. I think you have to know what the time frame is. If it's
February or March, because Commissioner, you're asking the administrators to devise this plan.
Right.
They have to take public input in December around the holidays, probably 2 sessions, afternoon and evening, maybe on the same day, maybe not on the same day. And then they'll have to take the comments received into consideration as they actually work with the team to draft and vet that out. So I think you're looking at February or March.
Okay, February, March, but that's a 60-day window.
We can get down to like February 18th.
Yes, I would
we'll
like
try
to
to get
have
there
a
as soon
date.
as we can, but
Let me ask you a question. Typically, or at the end of the day, when the Articles of Incorporation, which is really the meat of the whole thing, are put together, that's what we're going to vote on, approve those Articles of Incorporation.
But you're not going to vote on. You're not going to vote on them at that time.
No, I know, I realize, but at some point in time, that's the final product that defines your authority. That either addresses the questions or concerns that have been raised or it doesn't. How large of a document do you expect that to be?
5 to 7 pages.
I know, I knew the answer was rhetorical.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
a framework that these
traditional
things have to be put in,
articles.
then there's a few things that are customized to your.
Yep.
I think we're gonna take a lot of public comments saying a lot of the same things from a lot of different people over and over. And we've probably touched on everything here. I just don't want this thing to drag on.
It's 5 to 7 pages, but those are important decisions you're
No,
making.
I realize
right?
that, but.
So, it's not by volume, it's by the value of the content. So you obviously have issues here with regard to eminent domain, you have issues with respect to zoning, you have issues with respect to representation. So the document comes together, but the dialogue leading to that is fairly extensive and robust dialogue. So I don't want to be dismissive about this as a small document. Like we can draft the document at the end in a day or two, but getting through the meeting of the minds process to get there is going to be a lot of discussion and dialogue with the administrators.
Okay.
And-
Well, the points that you mentioned that'll be in there, eminent domain and the size of the board and the recall, I mean, those are the same ones I've been hearing over and over and over again. I will just go on record saying, I will be surprised if there will be anything in there that we haven't chewed on to some extent. So I'll sit back, but I just don't,
And
I like
you
to
know,
bring it to a conclusion.
The articles are much more flexible than your existing agreements to revise in the future. I mean, you don't want to set up articles and then be constantly revising them. I mean, that's something I agree with your comment about trying not to hamstring a new organization. But they're also, all of the articles I've been involved in to date have had, basically a majority vote capability of a board such as yours to modify those articles. I haven't seen them modified very much. So, but it's, don't believe because you want to do your best work. 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, you may say we need to tweak something. You'll have the ability to do that. So,
Okay. Are you comfortable as is, or do you want the date set in the
Well,
motion?
I'd like to have a target date, and if you miss it, you miss it.
Okay,
but
so
just
would it be a
give me
friendly
date.
amendment to set a target to get back to us by March 5th?
Of what year?
2020.
Yeah, thank you.
March,
There is a date, right, Steve, that we've talked about. Doesn't the FAA like to see this transition occur at a budget
Yeah,
cycle?
so we did map out a scenario. Understanding the two counties, your meeting schedule, your penchant for demanding a lot of public input and having study sessions, and knowing the FAA likes to conduct these transactions where the definitive date of a transfer occurs on the first day of a fiscal quarter, we've targeted October 1, 2021 date. So you're a ways away, and you may decide not to go forward, or you may decide to go forward. I think as you get to the February, March timeframe, your decision point comes. Are you going to go down this path with an authority, or are you going to back up and start up new agreement negotiations to reestablish your commission? So,
okay.
is that right,
So-
Nate? Is that
That is, you just
Yeah.
want to clarify, you said 2021. You're thinking submission.
October 1,
October 1 of 2020.
2021?
2020 or 2021?
Oh, sorry, 2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do
That
want to
gives me a
say
lot of
something
time.
else. March 5th, what day is that, Ron?
I don't know, it's my daughter's birthday, so I figured it's in the target zone, so I picked one.
I believe it's Thursday.
No-
Okay,
no
I'm good
later
with that.
than-
I'm good with that, but March 6th, I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, so.
So you had that
Not
date
that I'll be
memorized.
here.
All right, no later than March 5th?
The 4th is a board meeting.
Okay.
This would be the 4th.
The 4th is a board meeting? Why don't you
It
do the
should be,
4th?
yeah, the 4th would be a Wednesday.
Yeah, it is a
Do the
Wednesday.
4th?
So,
Change it to the 4th?
March 4th.
And mind you, Leelanau County may not agree with you.
That-
But we give them a date we're shooting. We need to
Yeah,
give them a date.
we'll give them
Give them
our
target.
date. Yep.
Okay. All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Kevin.
I don't know
All
how
right,
to
Thanks, guys.
We'll take
dismount
care of it.
myself, so I'll just leave it.
All right, do we need a short recess?
Yes.
Okay, short recess, and then we'll come back for the couple of meeting items. Call back to order the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners meeting for November 20th, 2019, back from our second recess. And we are on the agenda item 11A, discussion of committee assignments. It's something I asked to be on the agenda. One of the committees that I was put on at the beginning of the year is the LEPT, which meets directly before the Central Dispatch Board.
Acronym, please. LEP. Thank you.
Law enforcement, yeah.
That one.
They deal with things, they deal with area fire departments for things like hazmat training and just coordinating those kind of trainings between departments. I did not, when we went through this at the beginning of the year, everything was really rushed. I didn't realize it was so close together. But Commissioner Jewett is on the Central Dispatch Board, and he's agreed to take over that role since it's it's usually like an hour or less meeting right before he's already here. So, so I just wanted to make a motion that the board approve Commissioner Jewett taking over the assignment for the LEPT committee.
Support.
Okay, moved by Klaus. I'm sorry, moved by Henschel, supported by Klaus. Any discussion, questions?
I guess just a clarifying question. This seems pretty straightforward. When I saw it in the packet, I had no idea what we were going in to talk about because it was just committee assignments with.
Yep.
Same thing we've been asking this whole time. When we know what the item is going to be, could we please include information in the packet for the public's and even your colleagues' benefit to come in a little bit more prepared for what we're going to be asked to vote on in the future?
Yep.
Thank you. I have no issue with, I appreciate Commissioner Jewett's flexibility and I do not oppose it. I simply am asking for us to be forthcoming with information.
All right, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Commissioner Jewett, for picking that one up. And then we're on item 11B, proposed resolution, PAC, conflict of interest, page 148 in the packet.
So I would just like to move to refer the resolution to avoid the perception of tax fund influence on local elections to the Ethics Ad Hoc Committee, under whose purview the subject directly falls.
Support.
And, well, there's a little bit more, because I was also going to say, and further to direct the Ad Hoc Committee to work in consultation with legal counsel to consider the legal bounds of the resolution and other possible remedies, such as the county conflict of interest policy in its current or amended form, and to draft the appropriate resolution language for this board to avoid the perception of tax fund influence. You got all that?
Can you email that to me, please?
I sure will. But anyway.
I support that resolution.
Yeah.
Okay, so motion by Hundley, supported by Kafia, to refer this item to the Ethics Ad Hoc Committee.
And to work with counsel, basically.
And to work with counsel, okay.
Can you read it through again, Commissioner Hunley, please?
To refer the resolution to the Ethics Ad Hoc Committee, under whose purview the subject directly falls, and further to direct the Ad Hoc Committee to work in consultation with legal counsel to consider the legal bounds of the resolution, other possible remedies, such as the county conflict of interest policy in its current or amended form, and to draft the appropriate resolution language for this board to avoid the perception of tax fund influence.
Okay. So we have motion, second, discussion. Commissioner Jewett?
Can I?
Oh, go ahead.
Can I? So, because first I wanted to say I'm delighted that someone on the other side of the aisle has taken an issue with political action committees, and I'm hoping that maybe we can all march down to Washington and get Citizens United undone and all that. But because I do think the chairman has a valid concern about companies or organizations with related PACs seeking government contracts after giving campaign contributions. But I wrestle with a couple of things in the wording of the thing, and with the fact that it prohibits the county contracting with companies whose PACs may not give to the county candidates at all, but they may give to other entities within the county. I'm not sure if the policy is legal, given the current state of election finance law, which is why I wanted to run it by council. But then additionally, on the other side of that is that the concern that a company could sway votes with money or the promise of money holds whether the PAC gave money to a candidate sitting on the board that's considering the contract, or that the PAC could hold out the promise for money for a future campaign But it's not just contracts that have that problem. We could be voting on resolutions. You know, I mean, we've already faced things where, like Enbridge, I'm confident has a PAC, right? And we're voting on resolutions advocating one way or another toward their business interests. And, you know, a future commitment by that PAC to any of the commissioners, that has the same problematic thing. So I just think that it's a really good issue for us to look at, but it has a lot of thorns that we need to, like, you know, work through. And I doubt here at 11:20 we're going to get through them today. And I'd really like us to just pass it off. That's why the resolution.
So to clarify, this resolution simply states that Grand Traverse County will not enter into contracts with or expend funds to organizations materially connected to a PAC that funds local candidate elections.
Right.
So that within the county. So that would be like a township trustee, school board members, county commissioners. Would also apply to like the drain commissioner, you know, things like the sheriff. Yeah. So if we have a PAC interacting with our local elections, they're not eligible to do business with us.
Does the Michigan Association of Counties, I imagine, has a PAC?
Yes, they do not donate to local.
They do not donate to local.
Candidates. State level or above only.
State level or above
Yes.
only.
And that's, you know, that's a different battle. I thought this was something within our purview that, well, we could, you know, take a bite out of it. So,
okay.
Commissioner Jewett.
Is question for Kit here. Obviously, you probably read this.
I have.
Does the language make sense? Is it clear? Does it need to be reworded? Is it something that needs to go in front of a different committee to be reworded?
I didn't take issue with any of the wording. I didn't have very much time to review for legality. The two things that I wanted to check for right away were the First Amendment and freedom of speech, whether we're restricting somebody's freedom of speech, and I don't think that's a concern. The other one I looked at is whether there was either a conflict with state campaign finance law or whether the state had chosen to, it's called field preemption, whether the state had chosen to be the only one acting in this area. And that's actually a really complicated question. So I don't think that this conflicts with state law. I don't think it's a violation of the First Amendment, but I have not had sufficient time to determine or to have an opinion on whether the state has chosen to preempt any other action in this field.
If the state had a law that conflicted, would that not be an obligatory situation that is not affected by this resolution?
I don't think I understand your question.
The paragraph 5-6, the sixth paragraph, the third one from the bottom. It's acknowledged that certain expenditures are required under state and federal law, and such obligatory situations are not affected by this resolution.
Yeah, it did see that in the resolution, that it explicitly is saying this is not meant to conflict, essentially. But field preemption is different. And so, like, take an example of, like, gun regulation. The state has regulated guns extensively. And what that has been determined to mean is that even if local regulations don't conflict, the state has chosen to occupy the entire field of regulation related to guns.
Mm-hmm.
So cities and townships can't go above and beyond that, even if there's no conflict. And determining whether the state has chosen to occupy the entire field is a complicated question, and I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, but we're not making a local ordinance that says you can't do business with these entities. We're saying we won't. This is our internal policy, which falls under what a Board of Commission can do, does it not?
Probably. But I don't have an answer for you. I haven't had sufficient time to look at field preemption.
Commissioner Jewett
I guess my last comment would be I would not be in support of the current motion, but I would be in support of tabling it until the next meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Kafia.
Sure. So I certainly appreciate and think it's very important for us to look at the influence of special interest money, as I will call it, political action committee money, on all levels of elections, and certainly the issue of what contracts are awarded. When I read the resolution, we got it Friday evening. That was the first time I saw it. One of the thoughts that I had was how it impacts perhaps current contracts that we have. An example would be our current contract with the private for-profit company WellPath, which provides our health care in our jail. WellPath, I looked them up. WellPath has a PAC. WellPath gives to local, state, and federal elections. And in fact, their founder, and they're in legal trouble right now for quid pro quo corruption for giving to local, this wasn't our local sheriff's department, but a sheriff's department in Virginia, and the sheriff himself is also in legal trouble, criminal charges for this situation. So it's relevant. We are in year one of a 3-year contract with this company, and would this resolution impact that contract? We've entered into a contract with a company
So
that has a PAC.
Existing contracts, because it says will not enter into a contract. So once we're already in one,
Would it impact our
would not-
ability to renew it should we decide to
Correct.
going forward?
Absolutely.
And so those are, so I appreciate Commissioner Hundley's prudence, and that's why I was quick to agree that I think that this may be a great idea. But I do think we have an ethics ad hoc committee that was set up to look at exactly this type of issue of conflict of interest, influence on awarding of contracts, et cetera. And I certainly, hearing from legal counsel, he's not had enough time to look at this, and that he thinks probably something might be okay. I certainly agree with Commissioner Jewett that at the very least we should table this and really give it strong consideration, because there are very real world consequences on the way we do business that we should just understand clearly.
Commissioner LaPointe?
Okay, where to begin? First of all, this has nothing to do with PACs unless they are directly involved in the election of local candidates. If a PAC here in Traverse City wants to spend money and on my campaign, your campaign, whatever, doesn't make a bit of difference, and that's absolutely fine with me. Unless they're going to come to the same official and ask them to vote affirmatively to help fund their organization. And to just get this on the table, the reason I'm supporting moving this forward quickly is what's facing us is the same thing that's facing Traverse City, where Traverse Connect was very active, their PAC, in contributing the max to a number of the individuals running for office. And it came out, there was a couple articles in the paper that, and they used the term, quid pro quo. If they made it very public, their PAC, that they wanted to know what your views were on supporting their initiatives, and if they chose to contribute to their campaign, I don't know how the person could go and vote in a fair manner, knowing that their campaign had a contribution from a PAC affiliated with an organization that's now asking that public entity to fund them. So I was approached by a member of Traverse Connect and the Chamber. I didn't approach them. They must have got some vibes that I had some issues with that. And I told them quite frankly, my opinion on having a PAC, it's legal, not an issue. Having a PAC that contributes to political campaigns, again, unlike some people, I don't have an issue with that. But when they contribute to a campaign, to a candidate that's going to then vote on perhaps funding with public monies, that organization, I told them, I have a real issue with that, and I would either vote against it or I would abstain. Right. So I'm hoping that we come to some conclusion on this before we get faced with the Chamber coming to us to ask them to fund their initiative. Because although I think I favor the initiative, based on what I've heard in the presentation we had several months ago, I think it's a good idea, but I can't, in clear conscience, couldn't support it. So I'd like to get this resolved before they come to us and know that if they're going to ask us for money, they're going to agree they are not going to participate in local elections. And when you get to the local level, $1,000 contribution, which is the max, is significant.
Sure.
It's not like sending $1,000 to the state campaign or federal campaign. So it is an influence, and I'd like to see us, my own personal opinion, go forward with the initiative of Traverse Connect. But I can't in clear conscience go forward if they are driving it through funding, their PAC funding candidates for office. I mean, and they don't pull any bones about that intent. They ask you directly, how do you, what are your feelings on these issues, and make it known, well known, of whose candidates they'll support and whose candidates or what campaigns they'll support and what campaigns they won't. So I would just like to give Traverse Connect the option to modify their rules or bylaws, similar to what the MAC does, which precludes them, since they're coming to the county and we fund MAC to the tune of $16,000, $17,000. But their rules say they will not contribute or participate in county, the ones that fund them, in those campaigns. So I'm just asking the chamber and their, or not the chamber, but Traverse Connect, to modify their rules. You'd probably like to see them throw out PACs completely. I'm not going to go that far, but just simply say, if we want to participate in issues or millages or voice those things, but to get directly involved in campaigns, I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm forced to vote no against Traverse Connect and what they're trying to attempt. So I'll support this, and I'll support it now. And if at some point in time it's found out that it's not valid, I guess we can always change it. But based on what Kit said on, this isn't going to be something he can come to definitively with the state and what the state is doing, and when they preclude us from doing something. I mean, we're talking, if you want a definitive answer, my take would be, that'd be sometime considerably into the future. So that's my take on this.
Okay. I'm just going to say I agree with Gordy on this. I'd like to have us vote on this today. And if we find later on there's a conflict or it needs to be adjusted, we adjust it at that time. But upon a precursory review, our legal counsel doesn't have a problem with it. But he can do the further research down the road. So, Commissioner Kafia?
I'm sorry, what motion are we discussing?
Right now, the motion on the floor is to defer this to committee.
Right, okay. To the Ethics Ad Hoc Committee, and it's our purview to look at things like financial conflict of interest and contract awarding. I don't disagree with Commissioner LaPointe that we should get clarity on this. I do get nervous about us whipping up a resolution dealing with a specific situation rather than taking the time to really think through the ramifications of this resolution. Again, I brought up a contract that we're currently in with a for-profit company that both plays in the political world, giving money to even local candidates, and also gets government contracts. So I think it's the better part of prudence, certainly, to, at the very least, table, as Commissioner Jewett suggested, and certainly to get legal counsel. I don't think we're talking months here. I would imagine we're talking, give him more than a few days to look it over and think it over and answer our questions and come back. So I still support the motion to refer to the committee, the Ethics Ad Hoc Committee.
And I would think that if WellPath, the company brought up, is providing funding to commissioners, the sheriff, any elections, I think when their contract comes up for renewal, I would think that we should not be renewing the contract. I mean, so the resolution that's in front of us today, I would be in support of. And it wouldn't matter to me who ends up getting caught in that.
Okay, so I'm going to call for a roll call vote on the motion to refer this to the Ethics Committee.
Hunley?
Yes.
Kofia?
Yes.
Klaus?
No.
LaPointe?
No.
Jewett?
No.
Henschel?
No.
Motion fails.
Motion to table the resolution.
Support. Yeah.
All right.
And
We'll
refer
do
to legal counsel, I should have added that. Motion to table and refer to legal counsel to come back at our next regular board meeting.
So we have a motion by Kafia, support by Hundley to refer it to legal counsel. Is that the entirety of the motion again?
And provide you with an answer by the next meeting.
By the next regular Board of Commission meeting, yes.
So
Okay.
it would be on the next agenda.
That's right, the very next meeting.
Okay,
When-
discussion.
When is, Mr. Chairman, when is, for example, like Commissioner LaPointe said, when is Travelers Connect or the Chamber, whatever, coming back to us to?
So we have a draft agreement with Traverse Connect, and they asked for a certain amount of funding from the county. We have not acted on that. We have a placeholder in the 2020 budget that was just approved today for any potential funding that the board wishes to provide to Traverse Connect. So we have not received a second ask, if you would, from Traverse Connect, but the budget amount is there. And so I think we do have.
Some latitude, time.
So where I'm going with that is if legal counsel looks at that and we have it on the agenda for December 4th, I think it is, you should be able to get us an answer by then, for one thing, but then we should still be able to vote on it then, correct?
So, excuse me, are you just saying, so withhold any approval of any funding or any moving into any funding until this is resolved?
Well, I just want to make sure with this resolution through legal counsel that the language
Yeah.
is appropriate, but in the meantime, I want to make sure we're not handing funds over between now and 2 weeks from now.
Okay. I'm in agreement with
Yeah,
that.
the way we created the placeholder for this line, there will not be any funding to Traverse Connect without the board's approval.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner.
So what's the difference from approving this resolution and having legal counsel get back with us at the next meeting to reverse something here? What kind of damage could be done in that 2-week time?
Well,
I guess as a newer person on this board, I don't know if that is past practice to approve something and then go back and look at the language to see if it's correct and then make changes if needed, or if the past practice is to make sure language is appropriate at first and then vote on it and be done. I don't know. Can you clarify any of that for me, Kit?
I'm trying to think of pros and cons of either way, and I simply don't know past practice.
You know, as you can probably tell, I'm pretty fervent on this. I have no issue in delaying it, but I know that Traverse Connect is anxious to get on with their program. So, I'll support delaying it as long as the commitment is made, and you know that no monies or we don't come to any further agreement with Traverse Connect or anybody else. I don't want to just pinpoint this to Traverse Connect, but the one that's pushing the issue
Right, I get
is
it.
that one. So I don't want them to take that. I only have issue with them. It's anybody, but I would support delaying it to have Kit give a final look at it and fine tune the wording if he'd like.
So could I make a friendly amendment to the original stating that there will be no funds dispersed to Traverse Connect between now and December 4th, when we actually look at this again?
Can't happen.
Before I decide that, can I just get some clarity from the administrator on that exact topic? So Administrator Alger, my understanding is that they are not able to receive any funding without a specific motion from this board to do so anyway. Is that correct?
That's not completely accurate.
Okay.
I have a spending limit up to $24,999. My comment to you is that will not occur until this board approves that allocation.
So Commissioner, may I ask Commissioner Jewett, do you still feel that the friendly amendment is necessary, given what the administrator has said?
No.
Okay. So I would like to just vote on the resolution as proposed without amendment.
The motion, not the resolution.
Oh, right.
The motion to
Motion.
defer it to the next meeting and legal
It's
counsel to give us.
The motion as.
I'm curious, Kit, do you feel this is?
That's very
necessary?
doable. I can get something.
Necessary? Do you feel-
Necessary?
I mean, you did have a chance to read it and review it.
The next.
Do you feel
And I
there's
did say
danger
that.
in passing it? Or,
I would not say that there is something I would call danger in
Okay.
passing it, but I think I can give you a better answer if I have 2 more
Okay.
weeks.
And that's what we're looking
Fair
for.
enough.
And just for clarity, this has been tabled till the next regular board meeting of the county commission.
Which is December 4th.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That
All right.
was the motion.
okay, is everyone clear on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Kofia?
Yes.
Klaus?
No.
Lapointe?
Yes.
Jewett?
Yes.
Hunley?
Yes.
Henschel?
No.
Motion
Motion
carried.
Carries. We'll take that up after Thanksgiving. All right, we're on to item 11C, the pavilion's 2% request. That was, yeah, this was added at the beginning of the meeting. So let administration introduce.
This came in as a request of the pavilions for 2% funding. We, just due to communication between the pavilion staff and our staff, we thought that they were going to send this application directly to the tribe. They thought they were sending it to this board, so it's just to be considered with the other applications that were approved via the consent calendar.
Okay. Commissioner LaPointe.
I've got a general question. I know that we passed a resolution saying that they'd have to go to the various departments. The department would have to determine whether it met some standards or whatever. But several years ago, didn't those all have to go to legal counsel and they made a decision on that? Did these all go by legal counsel, all of these 2% requests?
They did not this year. I don't know what past practice was. They did come to me last year, and my
I assumed they still were. I assumed we put some caveats on the thing. We still said legal counsel would have to say that he
We
felt.
need to go back and review the video of the meeting because it was my understanding that while the policy doesn't necessarily reflect that legal counsel will review it, I do believe that Prosecutor Mogenberg and I had that conversation in this room, and that there was at least a willingness to continue to review the applications to ensure that those applications met the county function.
Okay.
I think it's a fair ask. I really do. Just to make sure that Mr. Cooney, I believe, provided us guidelines.
Yeah, there was a.
And I think that it's fair that the prosecuting attorney's office has a chance to review those applications, but prior to them going to the band.
We did just already
We-
approve a whole bunch of them.
Yeah,
as
is there a
part of
motion
our
to
consent
approve?
calendar, though.
Yeah, I move to approve the
Moved by
pavilions.
Hundley,
2%.
supported by Klaus to approve. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Same thing, item 11D, veterans 2%. This one came in late. It was initially rejected by the Veterans Board, and then is that the situation?
No, that is
Oh, what is
not
the-
the situation. It was on time, submitted via the procedures online. I think there was a question about who they actually had to submit that to, and it's just a matter of, it didn't get to us prior to the packet being put together
Okay.
on Friday.
I agree.
Okay, we have motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Support.
Moved by Klaus, supported by Jewett. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're at second public comment. Any members of the public like to address the board? Good morning.
Yes, Bruce Moore, 3363 Summerleaf Drive in East Bay Township. I'm in Commissioner LaPointe's district. Traverse Connect needs to decide whether they want to be a contractor or a PAC or a political action committee. That said, I'm disappointed in the resolution as it's presented because it only addresses PACs. It does not address contributions by officers. It does not address contributions by individuals who have business before the county. And the ethics policy and this resolution need to go much farther The situation with Traverse Connect is blatantly transparent. I am far more concerned with contributions that are opaque. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Anyone else for public comment this morning? Seeing none, we'll move on to commissioner reports. I'll start by saying that we did not contact each other to coordinate our shirt colors today. It just happened that way.
Clearly none of you contacted me.
We all shot and skinned the same couch, apparently.
We thought that's why you were late. You ran back to get the same color.
But anyway, commissioners, any reports or departments to mention?
I just want to mention that this was our first brush with iCompass, and it may be a little clunky in the onset, but I assure you that as we get through it and work out the kinks, that this is going to be more user-friendly, not only for our staff to prepare it, but also for the commissioners. You can link it, you can make notes on it, and everything through the software itself. So at some point, you will all receive access through iCompass to do those things, and I look forward to using it.
So it's not just about putting the PDF together. It will actually come as a iCompass file.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
or
yeah.
a link, and we'll
Yes.
go in and, okay.
You will have the ability to manipulate information inside it, make notes, highlight things.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
This is a committee report, but just a question for Nate there. Have we found a person to start training for Chris's position when she retires?
Yes,
They
we did.
stole somebody from me, again.
You had to bring it up, Commissioner Jewett. She's
I'm a
sitting
great
right-
trainer, apparently, and they just,
Yes.
Go on.
Well, you need to train a couple more then, right?
We received, I think, 54 plus applicants for the position. We vetted those down. Donna did some phone interviews to vet it down even further. We interviewed, or asked 5 for interviews and interviewed 4. The internal candidate was a employee of Bonnie's, and her name is Lisa, and already has a lot of experience and exposure to our internal software, and she has connectivity to many of the job functions that Mrs. Kramer already does. So it was a kind of a logical step for us. So Lisa will be starting with us, I believe. We have to talk about this yet, so don't glare.
she'll be really good. You guys will be really happy with her.
No,
I'm really sad.
December 9th, or tomorrow, whatever we can agree on.
All right. Any other reports, notices? No need for closed session. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Happy Thanksgiving.